Thank you for all being here in person. It's so great to call this meeting to order. And do we have anybody on Zoom? I think there she is. Good morning, Janet. Good to see you. Once again, we're going to give the microphone speech, which is that it's very sensitive. So make sure you turn it off. I give that speech not necessarily for you, but I give it to myself every time. So I remember to do the right thing. And anybody that isn't using it, make sure if you're on Zoom that you're on mute so we don't get any backlash from that. And I appreciate, once again, thanks for all your help on our technology, which we do every meeting. We do have kind of a exciting moment today. We have 2 new board members that are joining us. First, we had an appointment from the Senate last week, Angelis Zaragoza, and I believe she's not here, but listening to the meeting. Is that what we decided? We'd like to say virtually hello, and we look forward to seeing you next meeting. Do we need to tell Angelis anything further? Katie says no. And also joining us today is our new member, Jeff. Good to see you. We're going to be swearing him in. Jeff McCumber is the new secretary of CDCR, and we are thrilled to have him with us. He is not unknown to most of us in this room. He's been around for some time, and I think his leadership is going to be extraordinary on this board and also certainly for CDCR. He's been Secretary of Operations since 2019.
Yes, I've been Undersecretary of Admin and Undersecretary of Operations since 2019.
He's also has a splash of experience in healthcare. So he's got many voids he can fill for us in terms of his knowledge to the board, and we're going to swear him in. Do you want to do that now, or would you like to? Okay, let's go ahead and do your swearing in. How many times have you been sworn in lately, Jeff?
A lot. I've done, I think, five Form 700s last month.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to step over here because for some reason it works better for me.
Okay.
Raise your hand, please. I,
Jeff McCumber,
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion.
and that I will do well, and that I will well and faithfully
And I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Thank you. That's the
Thank you.
hardest part.
Yes.
After this, it's all good.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, if you could put your stuff down, I want to get another picture.
Put my stuff
your hands.
down.
You did a really nice job with that.
Well, how sad is it that I'm reading it, making it hard for him? It's sort of embarrassing.
Y'all are great. Adam, the flags look good.
Thank you. Adam, the flags, we knew those were coming up today. We had a number of flag iterations as we prepared for this meeting. And apparently Adam was on one side of the flag issue and Katie and the rest of us were on the other. But you took it well, Adam. Now to the agenda. We have a full agenda today, and I'm going to ask Adam to do his regular, tell us all how to behave during the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are meeting both in person and virtually. We will support public participation during this meeting. If you are connecting by phone, please be sure to mute your microphones or phones by dialing *6 to mute and unmute. When you are called upon to speak, please eliminate background noise before unmuting your microphones. If we missed you, please send a written comment to publiccomment@bscc.org. The email is available on our website as well. Board members on Zoom, if you wish to make a comment on any of the agenda items, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or physically raise your hand so we could see you. For members in the boardroom, please state your name before you make your comment so those participating remotely may know who is speaking. We will, members of the public, we will give members of the public the opportunity to comment after the presentation of each agenda item and prior to the board voting on an item. Agenda number 5 is the opportunity for any members of the public to make a comment on any agenda items or other comments in general. You will have 2 minutes for your comment. Participants on Zoom who wish to make a comment, again, please email publiccomment@bscc.ca.gov with your name and agenda item you'd like to comment on. You can also use the raised hand feature on your Zoom application. If you are calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. I will call out the phone number you dialed in with. Unmute your phone by dialing *6. We will lower your hand once your name is received. Please remember that we are monitoring your raised hands. As soon as we lower your hand, we will have your name and you do not need to raise them again. We will get to you. Public participants in the boardroom, please complete the public comment card on the table by the entry door and provide them to me during the meeting. Regarding voting, all agenda items that require a vote during this meeting will require a roll call vote, and I will call out each member's name at the end of each agenda item. Board members in the room, please remember to turn off your microphones when you are not speaking, and please remember to speak into your microphones so that all on Zoom may hear you. As always, we thank you for your patience. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know what we did the first 15 minutes of a meeting prior to going Zoom and virtual. With that said, Adam, will you take the roll?
Chair Penner,
Present?
Mr. McComber,
Present.
Mr. Vera Rosa,
Present.
Mr. Groudon,
Here.
Mr. Dykes,
Here.
Ms. Chavez,
Here.
Mr. Haynes,
Here.
Ms. Vernon,
Here.
Ms. Guard,
Here.
Mr. Mills,
I'm here.
Mr. Budnick.
Present.
Ms. Zaragoza is listening by phone, but will not be voting today. Ms. Kumpion.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The only final technical advice I'll give you is when you get locked out of your iPad, which happens to me a lot, your passcode's right in front of you. We're going to turn to the executive director's report.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass on my report because I do plenty of talking during this event.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you.
Good morning.
Mr. Butnick.
Good morning, board members. I want to echo Linda's thanks for all of you making the effort to be here in Sacramento in person. And Janet, it's great to see you on the Zoom as well. Welcome, Secretary McCumber. We're delighted to have you here. And Linda and I had the chance to speak with Angeles Zaragoza by phone last week. She's from Los Angeles. She has been practicing juvenile law for a long time. Scott has already told us she's terrific. That was also evident in our conversation. So we really look forward to welcoming her at the April meeting where she will be with us officially on the board. Sheriff Dykes is moving through the confirmation process and met with the Senate Rules Committee staff earlier this week. His confirmation hearing has been scheduled for March. So thank you so much, Sheriff Dykes, for all the work you've been putting in on that. Really appreciate it. I'd like to give some updates on grants and other executive steering committee work really quickly. After the enactment of the 2022-23 state budget, we had our usual July board meeting last year, and there we approved 4 new executive steering committees, one on organized retail theft. Actually, there were 2 grants combined in one committee for organized retail theft prevention and vertical prosecution. I want to thank board member Janet Guard for agreeing to chair the executive steering committee on that. This board also approved the local law enforcement gun buyback grant and missing and murdered Indigenous people grant, as well as the the Mobile Probation's Service Centers Grant. I want to give very brief updates on all of those. As we looked through the finer detail levels, in the case of the Mobile Probation Service Centers, we had the shortest timeline to encumber the funds. And so we had to move quickly on that one and put the RFP out in the field. The application period ended in January of this year, and we received 28 proposals, which is really great. $20 million is available competitively, and we will bring funding recommendations to the board in April. Our team has done a really good job recruiting for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant Program, and we anticipate that Executive Steering Committee to meet early in March. I want to thank Board Member Norma Kumpion for agreeing to share as the ESC Chair, and that grant will be approximately $11.4 million out to the field. The grant is available competitively to federally recognized tribes in California. Really looking forward to hearing more on that one. We have been hosting one-on-one meetings with subject matter experts on the organized retail theft grant. We have continued to have difficulty in finding volunteers for these ESCs. So we are modifying our grant development process as needed. And I want to thank again, Ricardo and team and Janet Gard for their work on that. We'll come back with more information on the gun buyback grant when we have that information available. Any questions on grant status? Okay, hearing none. Oh, yes, please, Sheriff.
Yeah, I know the officer wellness, I know the counties and cities got it noticed with the
Yes.
funding amount, and then
Yes.
there's supposed to be some future meetings, I believe, or
I'd be happy to give you an update on that. Yes, the Officer Wellness Grant was distributed out to local law enforcement agencies, and that means police departments and sheriff's departments on a formula schedule. And so our our admin accounting team did an absolutely amazing job figuring out how to cut checks to, I believe, over 400 different agencies. The update I had last week is that almost all of those checks have been distributed. We're just working through some final details. And then our research team has worked up the data collection instrument, and we'll be communicating lots more with the field on that. I do know, and we'll be talking with sheriffs and police chiefs about this. So it's great that you asked the question, Sheriff Groudon. We really do need to get contact information for data reporters from each agency, and we're going to have to do a lot of follow-up on that because we have not received that in big numbers. Anything else on officer wellness?
Yeah, I'll just mention, I think the check should all be out, we hope by February 15th. And then we're going to put another bulletin out to the field, I think next week, which will have an FAQ available for questions that we've been receiving in terms of what can we spend the money on and what resources are available for us to find out how to spend this money. So.
good. I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I thought I saw a question there. Okay, great. I wanted to also give a very brief update on the work of the Juvenile Regulations Revision Executive Steering Committee. We talked about this at the November board meeting. There had been a meeting scheduled, I believe it was on January 10th, and then we encountered the storm of the century and needed to find a new date for that. So the next meeting of the Juvenile Regs ESC is going to be later in March, I think on the 23rd. Thank you, Chief Haynes. And we are, we've been continuing to work hard on all of the development of draft regulation revisions. And we have put together a subcommittee at the direction of the ESC to do the drafting on the SYTF regs. And those meetings will begin very soon. Catherine Lucero, retired judge from Santa Clara, who runs the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, will be chairing that subcommittee. Chief Haynes, do you want to add anything to that?
No, thank you. I just want to just say thank you to staff and to Allison, to Director Lucero for stepping up to chair the SYTF subcommittee. It's going to be some good work that'll be done. So we're looking forward to convening that subcommittee really soon.
Thank you so much, Chief. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. And echo your thanks to our amazing staff team. That's been a ton of work. So the governor released the January budget proposal, and there's very little that's new for the BSCC. One change that was included in the January budget was a reduction in the third year of funds in the public defender pilot program. The intention had earlier been that there would have been a $50 million amount allocated to that pilot program in 23-24. And I think, as everyone is aware, there have been really significant reductions in general fund. And so this removes the third year of grant program funding, but it was done in such a way, and we laid that grant out in such a way that those programs hadn't yet been funded. So, you know, as much as that's a difficult reduction to have to make from a logistics perspective, it's relatively easy for us. And then there were some minor changes in funding in our Prop 47 program, a decrease in an earlier estimate to Prop 47 over the estimated savings, but we still will have quite a bit of funding to put out in the field for Prop 47 grants. On Prop 64, which is the cannabis tax fund, this year there's about $84 million coming to us for the program that we administer, and that is about a $15 million increase from last year's allocation. Ongoing grants, those are all pretty straightforward. Any questions about budget issues? All right, hearing none. I want to turn to our COVID-19 data update. And as I mentioned at the November meeting, we had made the decision to continue collecting COVID data from our local detention facilities through the winter. And as you will see, Adam's going to run through the slides in just a few minutes. There does not appear to have been a surge in COVID cases over the winter. And the remaining California public health emergency orders from the governor are scheduled to end at the end of this month. And the most current guidance from both federal and state agencies all indicate that the COVID-19 pandemic has entered the endemic phase. So with that, we will end the COVID data collection at the end of this month. And I want to thank both our research team and the local data reporters, because a great deal of work has gone into this effort. So let's turn to, thanks Adam, turn to the slides and we can move through these fairly quickly. The first slide always shows you, we begin with the adult data and a statewide ADP slide. The population statewide in the county jail facilities has remained relatively steady. There was a bit of a dip in around October, and the most recent data is just above 61,000, which is a fairly steady number over the recent many months. The next slide shows the number of detained people tested. And as you can see, in the week most recently available, the number of tests has gone down compared to where it had been recently. The confirmed positive cases, happy to say, there's been a slight decline in confirmed positive cases of COVID. Next slide, please. The positivity rate. Because again, I remind the board every time we have a protocol in how we collect the data for purposes of confidentiality, and so we have to show you a band between the case when an agency reports fewer than 10 cases. So it's always, I think, more reliable to look at the lower side of the band. So the positivity rate of detained people is somewhere between 0.74 and 5%. And again, as the research folks have pointed out to me, the cases inside of detention facilities is pretty much tracking with general population COVID data. Hospitalizations are shown here, and it looks like there was one hospitalization across the state in the week most recently available. So those are the adult data. In the juvenile facilities, next slide, please. Overall ADP statewide is at 2,500, just over 2,500 statewide. The case trends on the total number of young people tested has dropped a bit from a few months ago, and the confirmed positive cases have also stayed relatively low. The positivity rate in the juvenile detention facilities, like I said before, is closer to that 1.2% positivity. So this will be the last COVID data update for the board. And I want to just mention one other thing. connected to COVID that Deputy Director Ganter will talk about when she gives her report on inspections. We will be making some modifications to how we are doing emergency suspension of regulations, also in view of the end of COVID emergency orders. So just a couple of things we've been looking at COVID related. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions of Katie? Thank you. Counsel, Mr. McGuire, legal report you want to share with us today?
No, Madam Chair, I think I've looked at the list and we do have a grant item on the consent calendar, but I don't believe any of our board members are impacted by that. But I just ask, as always, for the board members, just to make sure on any of our grant items to look and see whether or not you might be impacted by those, but I have no other legal update. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Have you taken a look at the Levine Act and whether or not that the new expansion of it has impact to anybody on the board?
I'm not sure I'm aware what the Levine Act is.
So it's a brand new, it's an expansion of the former conflicts of interest for appointed and elected bodies. And I would just recommend that you take a look at the new changes. The FPPC is doing some rulemaking now, and they're doing it in real time. And I don't know if it has impact to anybody on the board, but if it does, I would hate for them to get caught unaware.
I will look into that.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you. Because council, we can't keep him busy enough. So we're super excited. We found something for him to work on. He's a busy guy. Adam, legal updates.
Thank you.
I'm
Madam
sorry,
Chair.
legislative updates. I got so excited about Aaron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a brief legislative update. A more detailed summary may be found in your reading materials. As a reminder, we do not take positions on any bills. This year, the legislature brought back some bills which were vetoed by the governor last year. One of note is AB 268 by Assembly Member Akila Weber, which would add 2 additional members to the existing 13-member board, a licensed medical healthcare provider and a licensed mental health care provider. The bill also adds updates to training regulations as well as modifications to Title 15 regarding safety checks, which were addressed in last year's regulation revisions. In addition to SB 63 introduced by Senator Ochoa Bo, the Transition Home Grant Program, which would require the BSCC to administer the grant. It's targeted for the sheriffs and jail administrators. Lastly, Assembly Member Holden has introduced AB 280, which deals with segregated confinement in detention facilities. This measure is a reintroduction of AB 2632, which was vetoed by the governor. AB 280 would limit the use of segregated confinement requirements and impose additional requirements for its use. The BSCC would be required to assess compliance with the law for each local correctional facility. Madam Chair, that concludes my legislative updates. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions? Looking to the board now as we close this portion of the agenda, are there any questions about any of the information items we shared? Seeing none, moving to the public comment on these items. Anyone in the audience that wishes to make public comment, there are comment cards in the back that you can bring forward. To those of you who are with us virtually, we hope you have emailed Adam if you have comment. And Adam, are you seeing public comment on these issues?
I currently have 5 members of the public who wishes to comment on that.
That's great. And please remind all of you who wish to comment either here or virtually that will be a 2-minute comment that you'll be allowed. And we ask you to adhere to that so we don't have to rudely interrupt you at the end.
Please let me know when you want me to close the queue.
You may close the queue and move forward.
All right. So we'll take the first public comment. That would be Lisa.
Lisa, are you there? You have to press.
Sorry about that. I wasn't unmuted.
There you go.
I apologize.
That's okay. Happens to all of us.
Okay, I just wanted to say a few words in regards to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, the jails. My son is Richard Matus Jr. He's one of the ones that have died within this last year, August 11th, 2022. Um, I have great concern, and I've just, we've been working with others and just tried to see what type of changes or policies or what have you could take place, because from what I experienced, and I know many others, they don't follow policy and procedure when someone dies. What no one knew what to say or do when Richard died. They would never confirm with us he was dead. He was still showing up on the housing unit. No one would speak with us. They would not confirm or deny that he died. They only said, we don't give any medical information over the phone and cannot disclose anything. We had to address the courts just to get his property. And this was a few weeks later after his death, because no one knew where it was. They claimed anything he had went to the coroner's with his body. We went to the coroner's office. They let us record because he was a pro per defendant and a co-defendant. So there was legal documents that were crucial to the case. So that was, one of the big reasons. And it wasn't until we went to court that we were able to get those documents. Now, to go further, to myself and many others, there's no transparency as far as if an investigation was even done from day one. Again, I called and I tried to get answers and nothing, not even a call to us. They had my phone number, address, emergency for my son. If it wasn't for my other son being a co-defendant with him, we would have never even known he died, because I never officially was told that he died. Although, of course, we found out for sure later because our attorney located him at the coroner's office. So my other thing is I spoke with my son 2 hours before he was found unresponsive, and he was fine. And I've read his autopsy report, and I find it very upsetting that people in the positions they have can outright lie to the public. I'm not saying me, because no one, and I mean no one, has ever made an effort to speak with me from the sheriff's department. Sheriff Bianco went.
Lisa, I apologize. I'm going to need to interrupt you. And certainly I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think you've done an excellent job of presenting your issue to us. If you wouldn't mind winding up very quickly.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Basically, there's a lot of inconsistencies in his autopsy report compared to what they actually said he died of. There's blunt force trauma that we knew only by seeing his hands, but we didn't know it was on the rest of his body or on his head, and also some health issues. So I would like to see, I don't know if you can have an outside agency or somebody investigate deaths, because deaths are still happening, and we don't know what type of information is actually the truth and not the truth.
Okay. Well, thank you for your remarks. I appreciate that. And once again, I think I can speak for all the board members saying they're, very sorry for your loss. And let me remind any speakers that are coming forward next that this is the portion of the agenda designed to comment on information items that have been previously presented, understanding that we are in receipt of a letter that talks about Riverside County, and that will be at the end of the agenda, where I think the board will be prepared to receive comments on these very issues. So if I might remind anyone who's going to comment next, please only on the information items, and hold your remarks on any issues that you want to discuss that aren't agendized today until the end of the meeting. Adam, next, please.
I have Paula Hawthorne.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to just tell you how much I appreciate all of the work that you all do. This is an important committee, and you do amazing work. However, I'm kind of disappointed that we haven't heard anything about the gun buyback. The funds for the gun buyback, $25 million. I was the community member who raised the money for the OPD, Oakland Police Department, gun buyback last year. The Oakland Police Department did not have the funds to do the actual buyback. So we in the community raised $25,000, and that was an amazing effort from the whole community. It did a lot of good. We had the largest, well, the only gun buyback Oakland's had in a while. And so think of $25 million and what that could do. That's how much money is in this grant program for gun buybacks. And I do have a question. This is really a question on what was just said, which is that you're waiting for more information about this program. And you know, in September was when you approved a report that had a specific timeline laid out. Clearly that timeline's not happening. So my question is, when will we hear more about this? How can the public hear more about this? I am, of course, working with the Oakland Police Department, who are terribly understaffed in trying to find out more information about this grant. And again, I thank you. I thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you. And once again, our goal is to be transparent, and when we move this item forward, it will come to you. And I would once again remind anybody who is prepared to comment next in the queue that we are now working only on the information items presented in the previous agenda issues. Next, Adam.
We have Paloma Serna.
Paloma?
We'll move on to Avalon.
Hi, yes.
Oh,
there
this
you
is
are.
I'm sorry. Hi,
okay.
my name is Paloma Serna. My daughter Lisa Serna died in the Las Colinas San Diego jail back in November 11th, 2019. We're really wanting to push the issue that we do eventually get to medical board members on the board. It is very crucial. My daughter was denied lack of medical care, and she died because of that from deputies and untrained or not experienced medical staff. And so we really do need this for you guys to consider having medical people on your board. You know, our loved ones are dying. It's very crucial for us to have experienced people that really loves to take care of people. She was denied just her medication, and she died 5 days later from that. So I really do appreciate the board for having letting me speak. But please consider in looking at all the deaths in the state of California. San Diego had 20. I know it was stated 19, but it was actually 20 deaths just in San Diego County. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Avalon Edwards.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Avalon Edwards, and I'm a policy associate with Starting Over Inc., which is a community-based organization in Riverside County. Respectfully, Chair Penner, I recognize that this is not the general public comment period, but I insist that you allow community members to raise our concerns now at the beginning of the meeting today. Your staff could not even give me an estimate of when the general public comment period would begin for today's meeting, and the conversation about Riverside County cannot wait for several more hours when community members may not be available to participate. I am calling to raise grave concerns about the fatal conditions inside Riverside County jails. In 2022, 18 people died in Riverside County custody, the highest number of deaths in Riverside custody in 15 years, with previous years averaging 7 deaths in custody per year. So far, we have already lost 2 more lives to the Riverside County jail system in 2023. According to your BSCC data, 89% of people in Riverside County custody are pre-trial. Other advocates and community members like Lisa will speak more on the specific ways that we expect the BSCC to provide oversight, which is also outlined in the letter that you mentioned shared with board members ahead of today's meeting. This body has never recognized the near constant loss of life in Riverside County jails in the last year. Despite being the only agency responsible for local jail oversight, the BSCC has consistently failed to protect people in Riverside County custody from a sheriff who has openly expressed his apathy towards the lives of those in his care. When COVID began to spread in Riverside County jails, family members with loved ones inside pleaded with this board for an inspection. When the inspections team finally conducted an announced inspection nearly a year later in February of 2021, they found nothing wrong with the conditions inside. Meanwhile, incarcerated people continued to report extremely restricted access to masks, cleaning supplies, vaccines, and safe social distancing practices. Nearly 3 years since this community's original pleas for state intervention, the Riverside County jail system is still riddled with negligent medical and mental health care, poor emergency responses, and now an increase in overdose-related deaths. And this body is still silent and complacent. Oversight means unannounced and frequent inspections of agencies responsible for this many lives lost. Oversight means tracking and reacting to inhumane conditions inside and high in-custody death numbers. Oversight is not waiting in silence until community members beg you to do your job. The BSCC must take immediate
Avalon,
action.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up, please.
All right. The BSCC must take immediate action to inspect the Riverside Sheriff's Department for its role in bringing controlled substances into facilities, as well as the department's emergency response protocols, provision of necessary medical and mental health care, and next of kin notification policies. I urge this body to push the bounds of your power rather than washing your hands clean of these human rights abuses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Luis.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Luis Nolasco, and I am a policy advocate and organizer with the ACLU Southern California. I'm here just to echo everything that Avalon and Lisa said. We have over 18 families that have lost a treasured member of their family since January of 2022. Many of these families who for the first year had to spend the holidays without the loved one. Families that have been mourning and channeling that pain by holding vigils, protests, and press events about what is going on in Riverside, just to be blamed and mocked by the county sheriff on social media. Families who were unable to help their loved one get out of jail because Riverside County sets egregiously high bail amounts. Families who might still have a loved one here today if the BSCC intervened and held rogue agencies like the Riverside Sheriff's Department accountable. There's no amount of money or actions that will bring back these wonderful people, but at the very minimum, the BSCC should provide these families with some answers and accountability. And as I close, I just want to make sure to uplift the names of the 18 individuals so that we don't forget their names. Alicia Upton, Abel Cruz, Justin Kale, Braun Hampton, Michael Vasquez, Yarez Villa Gomez, Richard Biscotti, Richard Matus Jr., Abel Chacon, Gary Hainline, Mario Solis, Sean Harris, Kashal Nirula, Robert Robertson, Ulysses Ayala, Cynthia Hereda, Katie Patton, and Ronald Cook. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nancy Juarez.
Hello, Nancy Juarez, Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. It's clear that the lack of access to medical care is leading to preventable deaths in Riverside and across the state. Riverside jails have a long-term and well-documented systemic issue with providing humane and adequate medical and mental health care. The annual number of deaths in Riverside custody has only increased in recent years, with 2020 seeing the second highest number of in-custody deaths in the last 15 years, just behind 2022. We're getting reports of people not getting the medical and mental health care they need. Some people inside have been given their insulin inconsistently or in incorrect doses, putting them at risk of diabetic coma. Others haven't received breathing machines and have suffered strokes as a result. When one incarcerated person requested mental health care, he was given puzzle books as treatment. Puzzle books, folks. This degree of medical neglect may be leading to deaths the coroner is labeling as natural deaths. Even when the coroner classifies an in-custody death as natural, we are highly suspect of the conditions leading to those deaths. No death in custody is natural. We ask the BSCC to inspect whether people in Riverside County are getting the medications and treatments they need to prevent injury, sickness, and death. If the BSCC sets minimum standards that are still allowing for 20 deaths in one county jail system in just 13 months, what are those standards actually accomplishing? Thank you for listening, and thank you to the families who've come today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Colin Ford.
Hi, good morning. My name is Colin Ford. I'm a policy associate with Fresh Lifelines for Youth. I'd like to also bring awareness to the 18 deaths in custody in Riverside County last year. I'm concerned with the lack of accountability being demanded by the BSCC. This many deaths shouldn't have been able to occur in county custody, and it raises serious concerns about the emergency response and safety protocols of the department. It is more than evident that the county jail system in Riverside is failing to properly provide adequate care and safety to incarcerated individuals. The BSCC needs to do better when inspecting Riverside County facilities and ask questions like, how often are safety checks being conducted? How thorough are they? What's the protocol for fixing a broken emergency call buttons in a cell? What's the average response time when those buttons are pressed? Are staff adequately trained in Narcan use and other CPR techniques? And how are these controlled substances entering the facilities? Overall, I'd also like to talk about the issue of safety checks that don't seem to be taken seriously across the state by the BSCC. In LA County juvenile halls, there's been videos that show that staff were falsifying safety check records. There's also been repeated issues in Alameda County and LA County juvenile halls with the timing of safety checks. The BSCC needs to do better with its inspections and the accountability it demands from counties. It seems that there's a never-ending cycle of minimum standard violations, followed by allowing an unbelievable 90 days, 3 months to correct these issues. And then later in the year, another inspection with a whole new set of violations. Where is the accountability for probation and sheriff's departments? If the BSCC is not going to demand that accountability, what is the purpose of this body? Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Yusuf Miller.
Good morning. This is Yusuf Miller from the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, the Saving Lives in Custody campaign in San Diego County. We have the highest in custody death rate in the entire state of California. We stand with our Riverside family to make sure that we address this issue, and no one should be dying in jail from preventable issues that they've been dying of. We've had some people who even survived. One man who didn't get his proper medical attention. He was supposed to get seizure medication. He was put on the top bunk. Although he was begging for his seizure medication, they didn't give it to him. He seized off the top in the middle of the night, fell directly on his head, and was in a coma for over a week. This is neglect. This is unconstitutional, and we need to address it. And make matters worse, he was a veteran of this nation. So we in San Diego County, we have scores of families who are with the Saving Lives in Custody campaign demanding change. Dr. Akilah Weber has put forth a bill. That bill was denied by the governor for adding 2 seats to this body. But I'll tell you, we had 1 death already in San Diego County this year in custody, and that family would say those 2 seats were worth it. The families in Riverside, those 2 families would say those 2 seats are worth it. We're talking about human lives. Let's get this together. We need you to be our allies, not our opponents. We need people, families, not to join our ranks. We want to be out of the business of consoling families and having families console themselves. BSCC, you can do this. You can put in oversight. You can put in regulations and support these bills that are coming up for oversight. Please add those 2 seats, and I would recommend a 3rd seat with the over policing of the homeless, that we have a homeless advocate on that board as well, not to reduce or maintain the same number, but put in the qualified personnel that will address our issue of over policing of people with mental health or drug addiction or homelessness. Please listen to this advice. Thank you. Yusuf Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, San Diego County.
Thank you.
The queue is closed. All other commenters will be taken at the end.
Thank you, Adam.
Excuse me, I was in the queue. I emailed ahead of time and had my hand raised, and it was then lowered.
Okay, who's speaking?
May I give a public comment? I don't know if this is
Sure.
happening to others as well. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Sonia Tonneson Castellano. I'm an attorney. I am the Policy and Legal Director with Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice. I wanted to first of all thank all of the family members for taking time out of their day and being so courageous and sharing your experiences and your grief. And I really hope that the board is taking note and listening and taking it in, not just to your ears, but into your hearts, because this is tremendously challenging for anyone to come and speak about the abuse or death of a family member before a state agency. So that's quite traumatic, something they have to relive. Many of them might have to go and seek therapy later today just from having to come and speak with this board. So I really hope that that is landing. And I just wanted to highlight that many of us are here not just for you all to listen, but we're also hoping that legislators who listen into the BSCC meetings and that the governor who listens to these meetings is briefed on them is paying attention that the board needs a complete overhaul. It is not doing the work that it needs to be doing. And the fact that there is an agenda that doesn't actually have the issues being raised by family and directly impacted people on the agenda is a failure in and of itself. It should have been the first thing on the agenda. It should have been the most important thing on the agenda. And when I look at the list of non-compliance from your 2 checks in this agenda, and I see a green dot next to every single one saying, yep, they're working on it. Working on it is not enough. Working on it is the status quo. That is not preventing deaths. That is not preventing violence. That is not preventing youth from being locked up too long and not getting adequate medical care. I had a young person who shared with me yesterday that when her foot was broken in juvenile hall, she was told, we'll wait to see if it heals on its own. A child, if your child had a broken bone, would you not leave work right now to go pick them up and take them to the emergency room? It's not okay. And the BSCC is failing. And we hope everyone listening today, not just you, but everyone who has an ability to change what's happening is going to take up that call to action. Thank you.
Thank you. That would close the queue, Adam.
I had also emailed and haven't been called on yet. Can I
I'm
please give public comment?
I'm sorry, Adam.
The queue was closed.
The queue is closed, and there certainly will be time to comment at the end of the meeting. So I hope you'll hold on and comment then.
The end of the meeting is when? Can you give us a time when general public comment?
No, I can tell you, we don't know when the end of meeting is. We customarily go through the agenda depending on public comment, depending on board comment, depending on the length of a presentation. It is unknown to us when the meeting will end. And so please don't consider our inability to tell you the end of the meeting of anything nefarious. It is simply, we don't know. So I appreciate you hanging on and waiting. And we will take comments at the end of the meeting, and I hope you're available to make them should you like to. Moving on, and let me say this, I think the board hears all of these comments, although we don't create a great dialogue at this juncture in the meeting. I think that we know your remarks are heartfelt. We know it is difficult for people to approach this board and talk about loss of life in their families and difficult situations that they face. And I think every one of us are empathetic, and we don't want you to misconstrue our lack of comment or dialogue on this issue as a lack of caring. Moving on now.
Chair, real quick,
Yes.
when will be the appropriate time for us to talk about the Riverside issue as board members?
Well, we haven't agendized it. It is a letter that is contained in your materials today. And I think at the end of the meeting, if we want to have a dialogue about it, that would be the appropriate time.
Okay.
Okay, moving along now to the consent calendar. And this is a time when anybody on the board or anyone in the public wants to pull a matter from the consent agenda, that you may do so. I am going to take a literary license today and pull item C from the consent agenda. Any other items?
Well, I don't think we need to pull agenda item C from the consent calendar, Madam Chair, but I would like to amend the board and staff recommendation
Okay.
for item C, and we can
And
still
I
take it up.
retract my pull of the agenda item C, and then we can just amend that item. Thanks.
Thank you. And in terms of a motion on the consent calendar, with respect to agenda item C, what we recently received an updated construction schedule from the grantee for that grant. And they estimate it'll take a little bit longer than 24 months for completion. So we would actually request that extension go out for 36 months. And that would be the amendment to the staff recommendation.
All right. Any other board members' comments? Any items you want to pull? Seeing none, anybody in the public that would like to pull an item on the consent agenda for consideration or discussion at this point?
We do not have public.
Seeing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda.
Dean Grouden, I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda and incorporate the changes
Thank you.
proposed by our attorney on item C.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Adam?
I think we'd ask for public comment one more time, Madam Chair.
Okay, public comment on,
At this time, we have no public comments for consent items.
Okay, thank you. Adam, you want to take the vote?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber,
Aye.
Mr. Vera Rosa,
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Ms. Vernon,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Budnick,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda items A through D.
Thank you. Moving on to item E. Establishing the Burn Grant Crisis Intervention Program Advisory Board. And I see Ian is here. I think Ian is going to create our first meeting within a meeting. So he's new forefront for the board at this juncture. Aaron, quick question.
Sorry. Is there any reason on this item? It's a new item. Is there any reason for any of us to recuse ourselves at this time?
Not for this particular item, Sheriff. We're going to establish this committee. There's not going to be any decision-making or action or voting when we convene the subcommittee. And certainly if you don't want to serve on this subcommittee, and we can talk about the scope of the grant and what the potential recusals might be, we would definitely look to you to ask for leave from Madam Chair to not serve on the subcommittee when we convene it. But I think in terms of just hearing this item, voting on this item, I think we're in good shape.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Chair member and board members. My name is Ian Silva. I'm a field representative with the Corrections Planning and Grants Program Division. And I am here to present agenda item E, which requests board approval to establish the Burn State Crisis Intervention Program Advisory Board. In October of 2022, the Bureau of Justice Assistance released a federal solicitation for the Burn State Crisis Intervention Program, or as I will refer to it moving forward, Burn SCIP. Authorized by the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act of 2022, the Burn SCIP program provides funds to implement state gun crisis intervention court proceedings and related programs or initiatives, including but not limited to extreme risk protection order programs, mental health courts, drug courts, and veteran treatment courts. As the designated state administrating agency for Burn SCIP, the BSCC submitted an application in December of 2022 for $29.9 million in formula funding. The results of that application are still pending. With input from the Burn SCIP Advisory Board, the BSCC would make awards focusing on gun safety measures to the Judicial Council of California to expand collaborative courts and to units of local government. The goal of the grant program, as tentatively proposed in the state's application, is to develop a multi-pronged approach to decreasing gun violence in California, to support local jurisdictions in their efforts to improve firearm relinquishment procedures, and to support the enhancement of collaborative court programs that address behavioral health issues with a focus on people who are at higher risk for gun violence. The Burn SCIP applicants are required to establish a state crisis intervention program advisory board to inform and guide the state's gun violence reduction programs and initiatives. This board must include, but is not limited to, representatives from law enforcement, the community, courts, prosecution, behavioral health providers, victim services, and legal counsel. The board's current membership meets many of these requirements as listed on the left side of the current slide. The addition of representatives from prosecution, behavioral health, victim services, legal counsel, listed on the right side of the slide, would meet the required membership for the Burn SCIP Advisory Board. Staff anticipates that the advisory board would hold meetings on the same days as board meetings and that these meetings would be open to the public. In summary, staff recommends that the board establish the Burn State Crisis Intervention Program Advisory Board, appoint Linda Penner as the chair, and to delegate authority to the chair to appoint additional members as needed, consistent with the requirements of the Burn Skip Federal Grant Program. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this juncture, we're going to invite members of the,
Not yet, Madam Chair.
yet.
We're gonna, I know this is gonna be,
Adam, this is a problem for me and I can't get back on this agenda. So not now, but in a moment. Go ahead, council.
so what we're looking to do right now is a motion to establish the committee. At which point, assuming the motion passes, we will then recess the BSCC and convene as the advisory committee. So,
Thank
but now
you.
we're looking for a motion and then a second to establish the
Point of
advisory
clarification,
committee.
Is it a motion to establish jointly appointing Ms. Linda Penner, or are those two separate?
Probably one and the same. So a motion to establish the Burn Skip Advisory Committee and appoint Linda Penner as chair and delegate authority to her to select the rest of the members of the advisory committee, which will, upon volunteer, be the rest of the board.
I move to do exactly that.
Dare repeat it. Yeah. Budnick seconds.
Thank you. In the interest of full disclosure, having my iPad work wouldn't have helped me with that. So I appreciate that. We have a motion, a second.
And the comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And we have no public comments for agenda item E.
Thank
So-
you. Back to the board. Any comments?
I've just got one comment in reading the material and one of the things that was mentioned in there was the Judicial Council is ability to administer these types of grants and processes. And I know it was mentioned, the pretrial release program was one of those things. And I think when you have these processes that go through the Judicial Council, a lot of the times in terms of the allocation of funds, the courts are well taken care of. And the example I wanted to give is that pretrial release program. I know my chief probation officer, I think it was Senate Bill 129 that kind of established that program. My chief probation officer does not have the resources because a lot of those resources went to the court. And this is a similar type of engagement, in my opinion. And that now law enforcement is going to be secondary really to the Judicial Council. And I don't know, as a process matter for all of us, that we can certainly consider some type of balancing so that the correct resources are out there. And also in this case, when we're talking about firearms, this has traditionally been a Department of Justice responsibility. And I'd also like to understand, where do they fit into that bigger picture? Or is it now moving this grant program, taking it away from the Department of Justice and moving it out to the locals?
I'll give that a shot. So this is just a separate federal grant program that was established for sort of additional funds to do some of these activities. We have been having some conversations with the Department of Justice in terms of what their role might be in terms of expending either receiving or participating in the advisory committee. And we're going to continue to have those conversations. But it's really, this is a separate pot of funding. So the other activities that DOJ has been funded for the armed and prohibited persons and other activities like that is state funds. And so this is an opportunity to use the federal funds to either augment the court approaches, or also potential additional opportunities for local law enforcement to get some of these funds.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, I just want to add one thought. In the federal legislation that passed late June, I think, of last year, the very specific language on what the funding can be used for was quite court-centric. And so we felt that we want to strike a balance, and we will allocate part of this funding to address gun relinquishment programs. It was pretty strong in the emphasis of court-based collaborative court programs. You'll hear more about that in the next presentation. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you. So we have a motion, a second. Any other comments from the board? We've addressed public comment, no public comment at this juncture. Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber,
Aye.
Mr. Vera Rosa,
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Ms. Vernon,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Hi.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Budnick, Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item E.
Thank you. And so unless council can help me one more time, I think we are going to adjourn now and begin the meeting within the meeting. And anything further you would like me to address on the record prior to doing that?
I would just say recess, Madam Chair.
Recess. Thank you. Recess the board meeting and we will reconvene following completion of our meeting within the meeting.
I thought you were gonna say completion of another Form 700.
Be easier than what. Thank you. Thank you for that relief. Yes, okay, so this meeting of the BSCC is adjourned until we complete our meeting. And I like the fact that it came up and said questions because, yeah,
We have some questions.
okay,
So I'd advise you to do at this point, Madam Chair, is to convene the call to order the Burn Skip Advisory Committee meeting.
okay, but it says before we do that, I need to appoint members.
You can do that too, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Once in a while, even.
You
I
were
get
ahead of me. You got me.
Okay, so we are going to appoint members to our Burn Skip Advisory Board, and I would like to propose the following two members. From Peer Reentry Leadership Academy, a behavioral health entity in San Diego, I would propose Andrea Dauber Griffin. She present? Come on up. And from the BSCC, our very own legal counsel, Eloisa Tutiama. And you may sit where your little name tags are.
No, you're fine. Thank you. I thought these made up characters. I didn't know who this was. That's why I scoot my stuff over there, yeah.
We then move to the agenda.
And then we move to the agenda.
Thank you. And we have two other individuals present. I wonder where that agenda is, if somebody might help me for the meeting within the meeting.
It's in your binder as well.
Thank you. Well, it's only fitting that it doesn't come up. Okay, there we go. We would call the meeting to order. We do welcome and introductions. Katie?
Welcome, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Andrea and Eloisa, for being available to augment the board membership with your two subject matter slots. Eloisa is a colleague here in the office, and so she's filling the role of legal counsel. And I just had the pleasure of talking with Andrea on a Zoom meeting a couple of weeks ago. She brings tremendous expertise as a behavioral health services provider, and she knows a great deal about working with and supporting community-based organizations of a variety of sizes, and recognizes the importance of including people with lived experience in our processes. Madam Chair, do you want to ask our new members to say hello?
Be wonderful. Because we know Eloisa is quite the extrovert. She can't wait for this part.
Absolutely. You can tell by the reaction on my face. Good morning, board and committee, advisory committee and members of the public. My name is Eloisa Tuitama. I have actually been with the BSCC. I'm starting on 8 years now. I actually started as an analyst, then as a field representative, and I'm now really happy to serve in this legal capacity, this new role, and learning so much from Aaron. Prior to that, I actually worked in a nonprofit and actually for a government agency overseas. So I'm just really happy to be here and serve on this committee in any capacity or anything, in any questions you may have.
Thank you. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Andrea Dauber Griffin. I am here representing the Neighborhood House Association, which is a nonprofit in San Diego County. This is very intimidating. I've worked with NHA for over 7 years, and I oversee our in-reach and reentry services. I also serve on the Commission on Police Practices in San Diego. I serve on the ATI Alternatives to Incarceration Advisory Board, and I teach sociology in prison. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to collaborating.
We're very happy to have you, and thank you for responding quickly and coming to us and doing this today. And please don't be intimidated. We just look gruff. We're really actually kind of a nice group of people, so it's really a pleasure to have you. So the overview, I assume, Ian, thank you, Ian, coming back up. We've seen you earlier in an earlier meeting. I felt I saw you today. So
Brief passing then.
thank you,
yes.
thank you.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair and advisory board members. Again, my name is Ian Silva and I am still a field representative with the Corrections Planning and Grant Division. I think that's an obligatory joke. I apologize. I am here to provide the advisory board members with an overview of the Burn State Crisis Intervention Program, or as I said, we call it Burn Skip. The Burn Skip program requires that the program budget and budget plan be approved by the advisory board, and staff anticipates presenting the plan for approval to the advisory board in the April meeting. As I previously mentioned, the Bureau of Justice Assistance released a federal solicitation for the Burn Skip program in October of 2022, as authorized by the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act of 2022. Burn Skip program provides funding to implement state gun crisis intervention court proceedings and related program or initiatives, including but not limited to extreme risk protection orders, mental health courts, drug courts, and veteran treatment courts. In its solicitation, the Bureau of Justice Assistance listed a number of program activities for which the Burn Skip funding may be used. One such activity listed was the implementation of programs for extreme risk protection orders, or as they're known in California, gun violence restraining orders, or GVROs. GVROs empower family members, healthcare providers, school officials, or law enforcement to petition a court to temporarily prevent a person from accessing firearms if they are found to be a danger to themselves or others. In addition to the implementation of GVRO programs, the solicitation also listed training for judiciary and court staff on GVRO proceedings and training on GVROs for family members or first responders. BJA's solicitation also listed outreach to community members, stakeholders, municipal leaders, law enforcement agencies, and those engaging at risk in individuals as eligible activities. Finally, BJA included related court-based behavioral health deflection and gun safety programs or initiatives as eligible activities. These included specialized court-based programs such as drug, mental health, and veteran treatment courts, including those that specifically accept clients with firearm violations, behavioral health deflection for those at risk to themselves or others, and funding for law enforcement agencies to safely secure, store, track, and return relinquished guns. As I mentioned earlier, as the designated state administrating agency for Burn Skip, the BSCC submitted an application in December of 2022 for approximately $29.9 million in formula funding. As you may note on the chart on the screen, Burn Skip requires states to allocate pass-through amounts for specific jurisdictions, which I will talk about later when I discuss the BSCC's tentative plan for Burn Skip program. I should also note that the results of BSCC's application are currently pending. One of the requirements of the Burn Skip program is that applicants must establish a state crisis intervention advisory board, thus the establishment of this body. The board must inform and guide the state's gun violence reduction programs and initiatives, and must include, but are not limited to, representatives from law enforcement, the community, courts, prosecution, behavioral health providers, victim services, and legal counsel. Program and budget plans must be developed in coordination with and demonstrate, excuse me, sorry. The burn skip program requires the program and budget plans must be developed in coordination with the advisory board, and evidence of the advisory board's approval of those plans must be provided to BJA. In a few minutes, I will discuss the staff's preliminary program and budget plan for burn skip. By way of preview, that plan includes subawards to the Judicial Council of California to expand and enhance collaborative courts. However, before I do that, I would like to introduce Francine Byrne, Director of the Judicial Council of California's Criminal Justice Services, Operations, and Program Division. We've asked Francine to join us here today to provide the advisory board with an overview of the Judicial Council's proposed part in the burn skip program. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Director Francine Byrne.
Hello again, Francine.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for being here.
I can move something up if I bring this down. Can't see everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
Always happens. Oh, yeah, then we have to adjust that. Maybe you get a step stool. That's what I need. I have to bring stilts with me. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I really appreciate being invited to be here to talk about this program. As Ian mentioned, my name is Francine Byrne, and I've been in this space for a while with these burn grants and have often said, but there's no relation. But I just found out about a week ago, I am related, apparently. Yes, I don't know how yet, but I'll probably spend the weekend on ancestry.com and Google and 23andMe. Anyway, so he was, Edward Byrne was a police officer who was killed in line of duty, and that's what this is about. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the program that we hope to be implementing, the programs with this funding. You probably know that California has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, but how in the wake of the most recent happenings the last few weeks, it's painfully obvious that there's much more we can and should be doing, but the local, federal, and state levels. One of the beneficial things about this funding and the enabling legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, is that it does provide states with some flexibility. So the states are, of course, very, very varied in their approaches to gun legislation and relinquishment procedures. And this allows us, each state, to kind of look at what areas have existing resources that we can leverage and policies and infrastructure so we can get the most out of the money that we will be requesting. We have the benefit specifically of an infrastructure related to gun relinquishment procedures in the criminal court system. Ian mentioned that there's a big emphasis on the emergency violence protective orders. We call them GVROs. Most of you probably know about that. But that's on the civil side. I just want to make some distinction as why we chose. I'm open to questions. And we are actually, I believe, the first state that had one of these gun laws up. We're already a little bit farther down the road than some of the other states that are lifting up their programs. So what we would like to do, though, is to look at the holes in the system that we have and try to plug them in to the extent possible. I think, oh, sorry. Okay, so we will be looking at these two major initiatives. One is to conduct research on the criminal side to identify the best practices in terms of firearms relinquishment. And we will also, as Ian mentioned, be using it to fund programs that address behavioral health needs for people in the criminal court system who are considered the most likely to use gun or be the victims of gun violence. And that comes from the legislation itself. Okay, so the first part is the firearms relinquishment procedures. So most of you probably know that Prop 63 that was passed in 2016 did a number of things, including restricting ammunition for high capacity rifles and increasing background checks. And it also set forth some procedures to sort of codify in criminal courts if someone is convicted of a felon or a number of different misdemeanors, what the process should be for them to relinquish their guns. So it created a process that is implemented on the criminal side. However, we don't know a whole lot about what is happening, how well it's being implemented. We do know it's being implemented across the state in a variety of different ways. And but we don't know how effective it is. We haven't really looked into sort of what the best practices is or are around this. What we know is that the anticipated number of guns that we thought would be relinquished when Prop 63 passed is far less than is actually happening. I assume that all of you in the room with your subject matter expertise probably all have different ideas of what could happen in terms of with the Prop 63 procedures and ways to improve it. And we may very well come back to and ask for some of that. But we just don't know completely what the issues are. So the first things we want to do with this project is to really identify, survey the counties, and it would go through the courts because that's where the judicial council, but we can talk a little bit more about the other partners in this. But we would survey them, conduct some intensive research to find out how each and every county is actually receiving the firearms and notifying people, sending probation out, how they're adhering to all the procedures set forth in Prop 63. So the first thing would be that we do work closely with the Bureau of Firearms at the DOJ on a number of different projects. And so we will be working with them as well on that. Some of you may know that last year the state did provide funding to increase the civil side of relinquishment procedures that went through the Judicial Council. So that's another reason why we didn't consider this pot of funding for that state. There's a few other reasons why it wouldn't be appropriate for California. I won't go into those now. But so there is a process right now that's providing grants to the courts and hopefully sub-grants to law enforcement through the courts. And I understand why that can get complicated and is not always the maybe most efficient way, but as the Judicial Council, that's the only way we have the process to do so. So with this, the civil side, then we'll be doing a lot of things that Ian mentioned, but they don't have that sort of policy in place that we have on the criminal side. So we will be coordinating with them and their efforts to sort of show them what's already in place in the criminal side, what the processes are, and then sort of leveraging the resources in terms of trainings and what have you that they'll be conducting to sort of round out that project with the criminal side. Is there any questions on that? That's a little complicated. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing for Prop 63. We'll be identifying best practices and developing resources for the courts and local jurisdictions related to it. Perhaps if it's a need for broader protocols and procedures, we'll develop those as well. So then, next slide. So the other piece of the funding then, as was mentioned, can go through to the collaborative courts. And this was the intent was that there's a huge need in terms of mental illness and substance use disorder, people in the criminal court system that they can access services and work on those issues through this process. And so the way that it was determined would be the best in term from the funders was to fund collaborative courts. Probably familiar with collaborative courts. They've been proven through research to be effective, cost-effective, and also efficient in improving recidivism outcomes, lowering recidivism as well as behavioral health outcomes, and reducing usage and substance use disorders. The programs promote accountability by combining judicial supervision with rigorously monitored rehabilitation, treatment, and community services in lieu of detention. So the SCIP funding then will be allow the courts to expand these programs. In some jurisdictions, we think they will actually be setting up new programs, new drug, mental health, and veterans treatment courts, but they will, all the jurisdictions that receive funding will have to use them to expand their programs as well. To increase caseload sizes, we anticipate most of the funding will end up going, or a big chunk of the funding will be subcontracted out to service providers as well. That's typically where it goes. We have done a number of these grant programs with collaborative courts, and that's a big bulk of the funding does end up getting subcontracted out to the local behavioral health entities. And then we will also be supporting these collaborative court programs through trainings, technical assistance. We have gatherings of collaborative court coordinators regularly and conferences. So we'll be doing all of that on the collaborative court side. And that's my general overview. I'll send it back to Ian, but I can also answer questions or we can wait until the end. Okay, no one has
any questions? Yes.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for the presentation. Kirk Haynes, Chief Probation Officer in Fresno County. When you talk about Prop 63 and, you know, when it was implemented, that it was one of the concerns I know we've had as chiefs is that it was an unfunded mandate and we pretty much had to pull existing staff in order to get that work that's required to be done. Very important work, of course, safety being the utmost particular of that when it comes to firearms, but locally, it's taken some concerted effort in order to figure out, who is responsible to do what and some of the things. And so I saw in some of the materials where it was talked about, those processes vary from county to county. There's been virtually no training that's been offered to our officers who have been doing this since Prop 63 came into play 4 years ago or somewhere around that time, maybe even a little bit longer. But really happy to see that there's an effort for us to be able to get training, some coordination of the funding, and any funding so that we can provide some resources to this process. So looking forward to how this information and how the funding is going to roll out, because I think the other part of the funding is this pass through the Judicial Council and how we can make that streamlined as much as possible so it can get to the place where it really needs to be. But thank you so much.
Great, thanks. And yeah, probation will be our first stop once we hit this running.
Any other board members? Yes.
I just, not knowing as much about court funding, it sounds horribly painful, at least from from talking to the courts in our county. So when you think about funding just broadly for the courts in terms of how you would use it to apply to this problem, what would you imagine? What would be an example of something you would want to enhance or fund?
Well, for the collaborative court piece, we've done that, and typically it does go to behavioral health, but the courts do identify their greatest need for the collaborative court. Is that what the Prop 63 might be slightly different? But
I'm just thinking about this funding, and let me just say the reason I'm asking is that, as I think about the challenge we're having on the ground, I think about even if we have processes, one, people really don't know what they are, even with gun restraining orders. But two, we have people who go to court all the time and say, I don't have firearms, and they do. So we have to go get them. And that requires law enforcement to, it's very unsafe, and we want them to have the resources they need to go collect firearms. And so in our county, in fact, just yesterday, we pulled some grant money together and then put some county money so that we could fund, frankly, the police departments in our community to create a collaborative to go get guns from people who shouldn't have them. So anyway, I'm just trying to understand the way the role of the courts with this resource is being imagined. And by the way, I'm not picking on the courts because, and so anybody from Santa Clara County who's listening, I'm not picking on the courts, but I'm really just trying to understand it relative to this problem we're trying to solve.
right, that's an excellent point. So for the relinquishment piece of this, so I think the collaborative court piece, that's probably clear that we're really not forced, but the legislation does say these are the three ways that the collaborative or courts can use the funding through those three different mechanisms. So that's that part. In terms of Prop 63, it's a little trickier because there is a whole other effort going on in terms of gun relinquishment procedures for civil restraining orders. This funding actually bars the usage of it for unless if you are represented. So if you are, if you have on the civil side, I'm sorry, this might be getting in the weeds. Is that okay?
No, that's totally. okay.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
so on the civil side, the funding forces you have to have representation, so legal representation. Basically, public defenders would have to represent the individuals who are the subject of gun violence restraining orders in order to receive this funding. And that would be very different than the way the California courts work at this point, because it's a civil process. There's no right to counsel. And, it would have to be a legislative decision if they wanted to prioritize sort of the gun owner's rights over, say, someone who's accused of domestic violence and has a domestic violence restraining order. It might actually impact how people choose which restraining order to use as well. So that's one of the pieces that makes it tricky. We couldn't use the funding necessarily for that piece of it, but we also do have funding available through the different project through the Judicial Council for the civil side. So we're going to work closely and essentially mirror that. There's more funding there. The funding's going through the courts, but it's also the courts are then subcontracting with, and I can actually talk about that later, but it's different. But the courts are subcontracting then with law enforcement and jails and what have you in the area. So that's, yes, yeah. So that's happening as well. So we thought the part that's missing from that project and from this is really even understanding on the criminal side how it's working, because it's so different across the board. And we really need to understand what's working and what's not.
And I will just say, in our county, we had to create a process, like the whole thing's been built from scratch. It's relatively new.
Right?
Yeah. so nice.
You know, San Mateo has, some counties that have processes, but that's exactly it. You shouldn't have to. So, I mean, we weren't staffed enough to do it. Hopefully, if we get this funding, that's the sort of thing that we can help and gather all of it, identify which ones work well and which ones don't.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues.
Yes.
Has there been any, Andy Mills from Palm Springs, has there been any thought from the courts to prioritize the, based on evidence-based best practices, prioritize which guns are gone after first? Because we know that domestic violence, according to U.S. Secret Service, that's a higher propensity to wind up in a mass shooting.
Right.
People who've used firearms for, with injury in the past. I mean, those are the kind of things, because right now, what we get are emails from the courts or from probation saying this person is prohibited with literally no other information. And we get a flood of them, and it's just really, it seems to me, to cover everybody's posterior, rather than actually following up. So I think if there was some prioritization by the courts, that would be, probably pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's, I don't believe that's happened, but that's good information to bring back as we're just starting this up. Thank you. It's very helpful.
Madam Chair, it's Katie. Just a comment on that, Chief Mills, and also Supervisor Chavez. Francine mentioned in passing, but the County of San Mateo is really doing well on these kinds of things. And although it is time consuming and all the rest, I do think there has to be support for, and I hope some of this funding can go directly to that, support for counties to convene very specifically on what you're talking about, Chief Mills. How should we prioritize? I mean, the law does require guns to be relinquished, but I think the points you make are really, really important. If we're trying to make the biggest impact on reducing gun violence, reducing mass shootings, that tie to cases involving domestic violence is really important. And I think San Mateo provides a whole lot of great information, which I know they'll share with us about what they did to bring the people to the table who were, all involved, everybody from the court to the DA, PD, service providers, and all the rest, to put those local procedures in place in the most meaningful ways possible. So really great questions.
Just two things on that as you prepare for this, Chair. One is, if the money goes to the counties directly, very often it does not trickle down to the municipalities. And that's a very difficult, thing for us. And then the second part of this, there's two different prongs of the gun relinquishment. The first prong is those are prohibited by the courts. The second prong are the gun violence restraint orders, which all of us are using on a regular basis to really take the hands out of dangerous people. And I know that has saved lives. So, either one of those, will need funding if we are going to be successful in the long term at the municipal level.
That's a good point.
Yes.
So I guess since we have formed this new council, and I understand this federal funding that's coming through is for a very narrow purpose, but in line with what Chief Haynes and Sheriff Dykes mentioned, the hard part is we're getting small pieces of funding for segments of our system. And the reality is we really need to work towards getting all those partners funded, because these are complicated cases at times and take a lot of staff time, and they are complicated and dangerous also. So I'm the sheriff from Lassen County. We just received the DOJ gun violence reduction grant. The sheriff's office did, but the courts applied for the grant that you were mentioning, and I don't believe they got funded. I don't know if there's what I heard is they didn't get funded. So the problem is now, we have people dedicated to it, and luckily we have a strong partnerships, but the reality is, if probation doesn't have the staff available, if the courts don't have the staff available, it's going to really be, a hardship in getting a really comprehensive program like each county needs. So I figured I'd mention that since we have this new council. So thank you.
And I think, as you can see, the board takes this meeting as an advisory, this creation of this advisory boards very seriously. And there's a lot of expertise on this panel and a great deal of concern as to how the plan is going to go forward. And so I would ask of both my own agency and you representing the courts, how do you perceive this going forward? What is the interaction of this board? What junctures will you come back to us with? What will be our decision points, or are we just going to be asked to look at something quickly and say yay or nay?
Okay, that's great. And I know we'll do some planning on that. I do, although can say right off the bat, just because of the subject matter expertise, I think you could be very helpful in sort of getting in and helping us with kind of the research end of it for the Prop 63 piece. So I definitely see it there, but there'll be other things we'll
Okay.
figure out. Yeah.
All right. I mean, I know we're going to look at the plan. I think what I'm sensing here is a grave concern, and, somebody taking these obligations seriously and wanting to be involved as this moves forward. And so we want to partner with the courts and
Absolutely.
ensure that all of the bases are covered as much as they can be with this funding.
Great. All right. Thank you. Back to Ian.
And Ian, you may be about to address this, but in terms of the different pots of money available, have we described that yet?
That's in a couple slides.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
we will be getting into that. So thank you. Sorry, speaking in the mic. All right, thank you, Francine. With that background in hand, let me move on to the preliminary program and budget plan, and I want to emphasize preliminary. The staff have developed for burn skip. The tentative plan, excuse me, just to make sure I have the right place. The tentative plan is intended to develop a multi-pronged approach to decreasing gun violence in California, to support local jurisdictions in their efforts to improve firearm relinquishment procedures, and to support the enhancement of collaborative court programs that address behavioral health issues with a focus on people who are at higher risk for gun violence. And I believe this is what you were asking about. Subject to the advisory board's approval, the plan would be implemented by way of 3 sets of subawards. The subawards proposed are as follows. The first would be a subaward to the Judicial Council of California for approximately $16.8 million to expand and enhance collaborative courts, as discussed earlier. The second subaward to the, a second subaward to the Judicial Council of approximately $997,000 would be to expand and enhance collaborative courts in state courts that serve California's less than $10,000 jurisdictions. For reference, the less than $10,000 jurisdictions are generally smaller jurisdictions that are identified by the funding formula used by BJA to determine these allocations. And the $10,000 figure is a reference to that formula, not a specific funding amount for those jurisdictions, just to make sure we're clear on that term. For those of you familiar with JAG, it's the same concept. Third, subawards would be provided to units of local governments totaling approximately $10.7 million to fund activities including but not limited to law enforcement programs to safely secure, store, track, and return relinquished guns, behavioral health deflection programs for those at risk to themselves or others, and programs that support collaborative court processes. The subawards for the less than $10,000 jurisdictions and to the units of local government correspond to the pass-throughs required by burn skip that I referenced earlier when I showed the funding chart. The proposed plan also allocates approximately 3% of the total award, or about $750,000 in administrative costs to the BSCC to manage the program. The solicitation allows for up to 10% of the award to be allocated for administrative costs. However, we anticipate that a portion of the administrative costs available will be required by the Judicial Council for their part in administering the program. The awards currently pending consist of funds for fiscal years of 2022 and 2023 combined as a single award and cover a 4-year performance period from October 2022 to September of 2026. A further 3 years of additional funding is expected for this program. So that's something that this advisory board may evaluate when additional rounds of funding come along for those additional allocations.
As I mentioned earlier, staff anticipates submitting a program and budget plan for approval at the April meeting of the advisory board. This concludes my presentation. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, Linda, I have
ahead.
one. So Ian, this may be a question for you or Francine, I'm not really sure, but as a result of this, and since we're trying to make decisions, obviously data is good with that. Going back to the collaborative court piece of this, a lot of that Francine mentioned goes to like departments of behavioral health. And I can tell you from the local perspective, once it goes that direction, a lot of data doesn't come back to measure the effectiveness of these things. And I think as an advisory committee, we need that data. I know there are laws that do exist that allow for that data exchange and not just, you know, hiding behind HIPAA sometimes and some of the other things that go on. But I think that would be important to this group to try to determine the effectiveness so we can be in an advisory capacity. And I just didn't see anything in the program presented either way that there was any data coming back in terms of those things.
Yes, sir. The Burn Skip program has a data collection element to it where the subawards do what we call performance measurement tools, report results back to us that we report to the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And of course, the results of those could be provided to this advisory board as well.
Yeah, no, I think that would be helpful. I think because we're talking about mental health and a number of things, obviously homelessness, all these other things that surround this particular issue. I see point in time counts in all counties clicking up, not clicking down. And so I think those performance metrics for this group would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a question about the evidence base for the proposal. Of course, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that collaborative courts are effective on a variety of outcomes. Is there any evidence to suggest it's effective on reducing gun violence for those who participate in collaborative courts?
I think I would ask.
There's not. Thanks for that question. And this is where it gets a little confusing, that there's, it's guns, but it's also collaborative courts. The research has not been done that I'm aware of to date on that. There's no specific tie-in from the collaborative courts to gun violence. This has been asked quite a bit, other than the piece where the Congress and the Biden administration decided that what the mental health piece was really necessary. And they wanted a way to get people in the criminal justice system to have those services. And this was the way to do it. But there's no specific things about collaborative courts and gun violence.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I'm a sociologist, so I would like to know, would I be able to review the data collection request that's been put together for this program? In other words, could I look at what data would be requested from subward recipients?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We have the required data that the Burn Skip required or the BJA requires us to report. We have that format. So or we have an indication from BJA of what they require us to report back.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Cindy.
Could I ask what the definition of deflection is as it's used in this document?
To my understanding, that's often called diversion, a program to divert someone from criminal justice involvement, as opposed to, I believe it's a similar term.
So just the new version of diversion?
Well, yes, diversion is the term, or deflection, I think.
Well,
you just-
it's used in this and I wanted it as a term of art. I just wanted to know what the art was.
So I'm not, to be honest, I'm not familiar with the term deflection. I've never heard it used.
Yeah, Supervisor Chavez, I only saw it in the last 6 months or so, and I believe it's very similar to diversion. My assumption, which I haven't done the research yet, is that it generally involved diversion that included behavioral health treatment, but we can look that up and get back
Well,
to you.
and part of the reason I'm asking is that I think this goes back to a very fundamental question we're trying to answer, which is what activity actually reduces gun violence? And what's hard, and I think you asked a great question, and I would be very interested in understanding at the end of all of this, and especially, just given this opportunity to fund some training and thinking about it is, how do we know we moved the dial? And are we, and one of the challenges is looking at year-to-year data can be very deceiving in terms, you could have one serious incident, for example. So I don't know. And let me also say that I think that as it relates, the reason I was asking about deflection particularly is that as we've been wrestling in our own communities about how we address behavioral health issues and making sure we're providing enough support. One area that has concerned me is that violent crime, using violent crime to speak to behavioral health and drug and alcohol and substance abuse writ large is a challenge. And I think we really are talking about a subset of the population, and refining that as much as possible is what I would really like to understand. And I know we can't predict every action, but what concerns me is that we may be applying very broad strategies to a subset of people that are in fact very dangerous. And as an example, one of the issues that was raised in this document, and it's something that I've been looking quite a lot at, is the correlation between substance abuse relative to acts of violence. And again, we conflate behavioral health and substance abuse. Sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. So in any case, I do feel like what we're trying to understand may be very difficult, but I'd like to understand what tools we want to use to quantify it so that we better understand when we're being effective and not on this issue.
Yeah, as you can see, the board is engaged, interested, and has some great questions. And I look forward to a deep dive into some of the answers that they're asking for.
And we would as I mentioned, there are certain metrics that we're required to collect anyway as
Right.
part of those regular reports. So if we wanted to build anything else into that, we would have to decide to do that.
I guess my question is, in what scenario do we begin to suggest other elements we want to collect and look at? Or is that in the purview of this advisory board, or is that something that the Judicial Council will? Yeah, that'd be great. Anybody that wants to speak to these difficult questions, jump up.
I just don't want to get too much into the weeds, but we do actually have a different BJA grant for collaborative courts to identify standard data definitions, because like everything else, they're all different across each county. And what's graduation? What does that mean? So we are actually using what we've learned through that to apply some core data elements that we know we want to put into the collaborative courts. We've been working with a national organization on that. I don't know the tie into gun violence. I'm not sure this program is going to really get to that. And I want to manage expectations with that, but it will be, we have a data set that will contribute.
And I think if I could through the chair, I think one of the opportunities we have, frankly, is to recognizing that this is just a piece of a program, is sharing data so that we can patch together what we're learning. And so I appreciate that very, very much. But yeah, I concur. Thank you.
It's a challenging project, just to come up with the definitions for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
And just to circle back to part of your question, Madam Chair, when we return in April would be another opportunity for this advisory board to provide additional input to the elements of the plan.
Okay. All right. Back to the board.
Madam Chair, just one simple process question. Simple. These are considered, I'm looking at the amounts, these are considered competitive grants. That's been the kind of the process for Burn Jag.
That is as of yet to be decided.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a definition of deflection. Here we go. Diversion programs do not always include a formal booking to jail. The person does technically enter the legal system's front door. In contrast, deflection programs entail no criminal legal system involvement beyond the interaction with the police officer in the field.
There you go. As Andy would like to say, that he had the
It's
definition
pre-diversion
too.
deflection.
Yes, yes. Okay. Thank you, thank you. Turning now to members of the public that would like to comment on this item.
Yes, I have two members of the public who would like to comment on this. I have Leslie Crawford.
Okay, I'm here. And
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize because I initially wanted to get at the end of this conference, representing Yusuf Miller with the Equity and Justice in San Diego, North County. But I'm listening to the talk on this, and I think I want to say to the board that funding is fine, but Sacramento has a FUBAR issue. Funding is put out by the legislature, but the agencies and departments, it never dribbles down to the people who need to implement the programs. So I initially wanted to talk to you about getting extra mental health people on the board. I lost my son last summer or last fall because I couldn't get him health care before he ended up in a North San Diego jail. But what I'm trying to say to you is you can suggest funding, but unless it gets down to the bottom, what good is it? And the reason I am for extra mental health professionals on your council is because I define you to tell me that there isn't some mental health germ at the bottom of the recent mass shootings. Addiction comes from mental health problems. Homelessness, gun control is no good because it comes across the border. So you have to identify who are these people that are using the guns to shoot. Many times they have mental health problems in their past. So I really believe mental health is the core. And well, you know, I know you have problems, but funding is not the problem. Funding doesn't work if it doesn't get to the people who need to have the funds. And I love California, but we really have a problem dribbling down. So I will end this and not bother you, but
No bother.
I think-
Thank you for your remarks.
I think everything leads back to mental health. I
Thank you.
defy you to challenge me on that. We all have a globe on top of our head. Thank you and very much
Thank
for
you.
your opportunity.
We have three more. That's the next one would be Rod Wade.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to be on this call. I'm from Fresno, California, and I'm a part of a program called Advanced Peace. We have similar models throughout the state. And what we do with these gun violence incidents in the other states that have advanced peace programs nationwide is we address those core individuals that are actually out here committing those type of offenses. We have communication relationships with probation officers, either juveniles or adults that are getting charged for gun charges. And what we try to do, especially if we catch them at the younger ages, is we try to mentor these young men. A lot of them are going through different things, homelessness, shelter, and a lot of them really don't want to be out there, but it's survival. And a lot of them is just doing things based on trying to live. Now, mind you, there are some doing outside things, these mass shootings and things of those natures. But the way the fellowship work for us is that we engage these individuals on a daily basis, 3 to 4 times a day, as sort of like a mentorship. We give them training, we teach them life skills. We actually make them build a life map of what they actually want to achieve in life and set goals for them that make it attainable for them. And it's an 18-month program where, you know, we interact and we seeing what's going on in the home. We help them with job searches. We help them with job clothing. We help them with food. We help them with housing in some cases. We're there though for them like a dad. A lot of these people don't really have nobody that's ever loved them before, that never took the time to see what's going on with them and what's wrong with them. And that's basically what we do. It's a thing where, and it's an 18-month progress. And without the love, locking them up, some of them do have mental issues, but without caring for them, instead of just locking them up and throwing them away, we're gonna keep repeating the same things that they did. I think love at the bottom core is what will help in a lot of these situations. And that's what we do. We take the time out to care for these dudes. We check up on them on the daily morning call. Before I get up and come to work, I call all of my guys on my caseload. How you doing this morning? What's your plan for today? What you got on the agenda? If one of them need a ride to work, if I I can't get there for them, I Uber them. If they need close to an interview, I provide that. We get them social security cards, driver's license, ID, birth certificates. Just taking the initiative to invest in them and show them something better. I think if we invest in more programs that is actually dealing with the individuals that are dealing with the crimes, and once you build those relationships, from those relationships, you'll see that, okay, we got a mental health issue here, or we got a no parents in the house, a single mom, no guidance, no structure, or you see some other stuff. He's been in an abusive relationship.
I think
or
we're gonna have to
abusive
ask you to
household.
wind down just a bit here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Thanks.
ma'am. I just want to say that, there are some programs that have been effective that keep data on those type of programs. And in our city, the first year we brought the violent crime down 35%.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Amir Chappelle.
Good afternoon, members of the BSCC Advisory Drag Board. Pleasure to be here. Amir Chappell. I just wanted to talk about the presentation that specifically outlined, some of the rough ideas of where the funding would go. And I just want to urge the advisory board to consider using some of the SCIP funding for a statewide landscape analysis. I heard a lot about trying to reduce gun violence, and when you do that at the city level, the end result is in the identification of the individuals that are actively engaging in violence in that community. So the targeted interventions can focus on that small subset of population that somebody on the board was talking about. And so I just wanted to be sure also that the committee considered some of the other activities. I heard about collaborative court programs. I'm not sure if that entails specialty courts, but there is some literature around the impact and effectiveness of gun violence courts, which is a type of specialty courts that specifically would focus on this subset of the population. There's some in Philadelphia, in Brooklyn, in Jefferson County, Alabama, and things of that nature. I also wanted to urge the committee to think about some of the other aspects that the SCIP plan funding that allows for, which is that technology and information sharing. The development of a validated gun violence risk assessment tool, looking at some assertive community treatment programs, triage services, and other behavioral health services. And so I just want to urge the committee to think about adding some measures that the state of California and this advisory board thinks are relevant to assessing the impact and effectiveness of how the funding is being doled out and allocated. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Saxon's.
We'll just go with Saxon.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Hi, yes, sorry, I am here. I'm a little confused on which topic we're on, but I'm just gonna go ahead and state sorry, I had to leave the meeting earlier
Well,
to do a
I can help
CBS.
you. We're on the burn skip agenda item.
Okay, no, I would like to talk about my brother dying in custody, so I will go ahead and give up my turn right now and come back to when we get to that.
Thank you. Thank you. We
Okay.
look forward to hearing from you.
And once again, we have Yusuf Miller.
The same thing. I was a little confused. I'll wait for the dying in custody
Okay.
campaign talk.
I appreciate your patience. Thank you. Thank you. We're a little doing things a little differently today, so I apologize for any confusion you may have out there.
That's it for public comments.
Thank you very much. So we have public comment. The board, anything further after public comment? Seeing none. I don't think this is an action item, so we will adjourn this portion of our meeting. And to our ad hoc members that joined us today, Andrea and Eloisa, thank you so much. And we look forward to meeting with you again.
Thank you.
Dean? No, I wanted to ask about, See pictures. We got to see pictures out. All right. All right. Looks like we have all the board members back. We're going to reconvene. Board of State and Community Corrections. And I see already waiting for us on item F is Allison Ganter. And Allison, you may take this matter away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members, colleagues and members of the community. I am Allison Ganter, Deputy Director with the Facility Standards and Operations Division. This afternoon, I'm here to request your approval for 2 modified sections of the Adult Title 15 minimum standards. We're requesting that you approve modified text for sections 1030, which is Suicide Prevention Program, and 1065, which is Exercise and Recreation of the Title 15 regulations for adult local detention facilities. And as you'll recall, the board approved proposed changes to the Title 15 regulations for adult facilities at its November 2021 meeting. After the required rulemaking activities, including several public comment periods, those regulations were adopted by the Office of Administrative Law. They became effective on January 1st, 2023. However, during that extensive review process, the Office of Administrative Law informed BSCC staff that the proposed text for these 2 sections, 1030 and 1065, didn't meet the clarity standards for the Administrative Procedures Act and required additional modifications. So our staff drafted modified text to include the feedback from the Office of Administrative Law staff to ensure that the proposed regulations can be correctly interpreted. The intent of the regulations and the revisions were not affected. And we informed the board of this activity at your most recent meeting, and you approved those revisions. They have not changed since then. So following that meeting, we began another rulemaking process and had another 15-day public comment period from December 23rd, 2022 through January 8th of 2023 in accordance with the OAL requirements. And while we did receive several comments on the proposed action, none caused the BSCC to make additional revisions. So the originally revised text, as you approved at your last meeting, will be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law for adoption with an estimated effective date of April 1st, 2023 with your approval. And before I summarize that request for approval or take any questions, I'd really like to thank my colleagues Ginger Wolf and Lindsay Tu and Amanda Ferreira for their fantastic work on regulations, revisions and rulemaking. The work they do is really nothing short of remarkable. So I want to make sure that they know how much we appreciate them. So to summarize, we're asking that the board approve the modifications of text to the proposed regulations, and those are in attachment F1. Approve the final rulemaking package, and then direct staff to submit the final rulemaking package to the Office of Administrative Law, including the modified text to the proposed regulations, final proposed regulations, final statement of reasons, and any other rulemaking documents required by the Administrative Procedures Act. And all of those documents are in your board packet. Thank you.
What page are these changes on? Page? 268?
267.
268?
267.
It would be
and
really helpful in the future if on the agenda on page 1 and 2, you'd actually put on each item what page it is, because you got to skip to these pages.
Actually, if you click on the agenda item itself, and if you go to the attachment, where it says attachment F1, click on that, and it'll take you to that attachment. On the attachment.
Oh, wow, you're right.
Yeah, it jumps to.
Look at this technology. You guys are way ahead of me.
Did you watch my
He just did
instruction
that
video?
based on his-
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Did you watch my instruction video?
No. I didn't think it was well shot enough. I'm kidding. High standards.
There you go. Okay, to the board with any questions, remarks regarding this item? Adam, I look to you for any members of the public that wish to comment on this item.
I have two members of the public who raised their hands. I have Ashley Rojas.
And before you begin, Ashley and whoever else is in the queue, please remember,
Before the public comment, I do have the board member, Janet.
Janet Guard.
oh, I apologize, Janet.
Thank
My
you. My question relates to the suicide prevention program language. I am curious in subdivision E, where it talks about housing recommendations. And the second sentence is the least restrictive environment should be considered. And I'm curious about how that language came to be, and specifically the use of the word should as opposed to shall, which is used elsewhere, and why it is simply considered as opposed to that is required.
That's a great question. This regulation is modeled on the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare Standards. And most likely, I don't have those in front of me. That language is likely reflective of the should and considered in those situations. These regulations are designed to provide the agency that's performing these operations, the flexibility to meet the intent and follow best practices, but also working with very different types of facilities across the state. So I believe that the language choices allows agencies to they might not have as many choices for a least restrictive environment. A least restrictive environment could look very different in one detention facility than another. The agency could also be impacted by crowded conditions and lack of space to put people in an ideal environment. So that's most likely some of the reasons why the language has a should rather than shall.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. But frankly, the way that I read that sentence, it's almost meaningless. And I wonder if
it's almost, I'm sorry.
It's almost meaningless.
Okay.
You should consider. So I'm wondering if we have the ability at this point and whether it would be wise to make that a stronger sentence. At a minimum, rather than should, I would think it should be shall, which at least in the law means something. And I wonder whether there's not an ability to strengthen the shall be considered language to say that the placement shall be the least restrictive environment. And then you can modify it somewhat to say, you know, reasonably, maybe, and maybe I'm the only person who this is an issue for.
I'm looking to anyone on the board that may have further consideration of this issue that Janet raises. I absolutely see what you're saying. I'm certain that what the regulation is allowing is in places where there is no ability to segregate or adhere with the standard, that allows for that. Understanding that maybe you don't want to consider that, or that you think it should be stronger language.
I concur partially in that. This is really process oriented, and the difference between should and shall consider is meaningful. The part where I differ slightly from an operation standpoint is to remove altogether going beyond the considered. In other words, these are the things that you must take into account, and you shall consider the least restrictive option. Ending there and not making the least restrictive option mandatory, because there's a whole host of things that has to be considered by the person that has custody. And at least if they're being considered, that tells you the process, and then they can justify internally why the decision to place them somewhere else was necessary.
And I understand that, and maybe that's enough. Thank you.
Hey, Allison, I know also when you went to consider the language change, you also consulted with a number of professionals in jails who are actually doing this work. And I think with the really voluminous amounts of folks that unfortunately are coming into custody that have mental health issues, no facility is designed for what we're seeing currently. And to take away that flexibility would certainly actually harm people. We flex in our current jail system right now, Your Honor, with people that may actually sit outside of a cell based on their potential for suicide, all the way up through having cells specifically designed for people experiencing that. And there's just not enough to go around on any given night, particularly in very busy jurisdictions. So that flexibility really does help us to some degree, make sure we're meeting the mark individually for those people, like Guillermo stated, taking into account those steps we take in the process.
Anything further on this item? Looking to the public for comment on this item. And as I began to say earlier, I'm going to ask you to comment on this item specifically. If you begin to talk about something outside of the bounds, I'm going to ask you to stop and wait till the end of the agenda.
So I have two public commenters. The first one is Ashley Rojas.
Hello, I am Ashley Rojas calling with Indigenous Justice, but I believe I will hold until public comment considering the instruction just given.
Oh, thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that.
The next one is Paloma Serna.
Yes, I will also wait until the public comment.
Thank you, Paloma. I appreciate that again. Hearing no more from the public, I would then ask for a motion on the recommendations from staff.
Move to approve the motion from staff to accept the recommendations.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Oh, thank you. Adam?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Was that inclusive of the shared language that was developed by two of our colleagues?
I had the impression it was, we were allowing the language in the agenda item to stand. I didn't think we changed language.
I think it would require a separate motion to change the language from should consider to shall consider, and that never happened.
Thank you.
May I offer that as an amendment?
Yes, but we'll have to hold a minute because I think I have a process question now. But I need counsel and he's in the middle of a conversation. So counsel, just to directly inquire of you, should we change the word from should to shall? Then do we restart the process with the,
Yes.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, so we do have a timing problem in terms of completing this final reg package. And given the other changes to 1030, the suicide prevention program and the out of cell time, I appreciate Board Member Guard's language choice. I would lean towards agreeing that it should be shall than should. But I don't think it, from an inspection standpoint, it makes a large material difference in terms how it would be operationalized. And just in terms of timing, I think the recommendation would be to just move and adopt the package and flag this for the next round and
I think
in
that
terms of cleanup.
understanding that this would reverse this process back somewhere around months.
Yeah, we're targeting April for the effective date.
And we need this, very much need this to be memorialized quickly in April, and so we can move forward. With that said, I do think that the conversation here was important, and flagging it for the next inspection cycle, I think would be my suggestion, but I defer to you, Board Member Guard.
Thank you. Based on what Aaron has said, I will withdraw my request.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
make a note of that for our next revision.
And thank you for your suggestion. So we have a motion. Did I get a second? Okay. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber,
Aye.
Mr. Vera Rosa,
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez.
Yes.
Mr. Haynes. Aye. Ms. Vernon,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Budnick. Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item F.
Thank you. And thank you, Allison. Although you're not leaving, I would move to yeah, stay right there. We're moving on now to agenda item G,
Yes.
local detention facilities inspection update.
Yes, yes. Hello again, Allison Ganter with the Board of State and Community Corrections. I am going to provide you with the regular update on local detention facility inspections and the status of non-compliance issues. And I'll also provide a really quick update on our current inspection cycle. So as you know, our 2022 inspection cycle concluded on December 31st of 2022. The board had approved extending our inspection cycle by 6 months to account for a lot of travel delays and other effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we began our 23-24 inspection cycle just a few short weeks ago on January 1st, and it will run through December 31st, 2024. When I do these updates on items of non-compliance, we'll make a distinction between the previous cycle holdovers and then the current cycle items of non-compliance. So our team is already out there. Our field representatives are out there providing pre-inspection briefings and conducting inspections. On top of that, there's also new adult regulation revisions that they're inspecting the facilities for. So we really, I'm really appreciative of how quickly the team has gotten out there and begun those inspections. This will also be our first cycle with the enhanced inspection process in place. And a quick reminder of that is, although it's a biennial inspection cycle, we will be conducting annual inspections starting this year. Year one will be a comprehensive inspection. Each detention facility will get inspected for every single applicable Title 15 and Title 24 regulation. Year two will be a targeted inspection. Field representatives will focus on items from the previous cycle, other items that come up during the time, or perhaps to observe the physical plant and some issues with that. We are also conducting unannounced inspections. Again, those will not be announced. Those will happen throughout the course of this 2-year cycle. Again, unannounced inspections will be to follow up on items of non-compliance, to follow up on a concern that's come to our team, or also check in on health and sanitary and Title 24 conditions. I do want to make a note that we were able to conduct 41 inspections, unannounced inspections, on top of doing all of our other inspections during our previous inspection cycle. And that was the legislation that that allowed us to do that was effective in July of 2021. So I'm really proud of the field reps who they all got out there. We got a bunch of unannounced inspections done. Those reports are available on our website as well. And again, I'll continue to bring updates on our new inspection cycle to the board. So on to the adult items of non-compliance. And I do want to clarify that we haven't identified any items of non-compliance from the 2023-24 cycle yet. So what you're looking at are many of the same items from the previous inspection cycle, the 2022 inspection cycle. So for the adult items, I'll start with those, and a very quick reminder of the codes that you see here. Green means that they are in a corrective action process. It doesn't mean that we're not tracking them anymore. It means that they are within either a statutory or the board approved an enhanced inspection process and are working through their corrective action plan. Yellow and gray mean that they're working through corrective action and the BSCC doesn't feel that there's a substantial threat to safety and security. And red can mean several things, including that the agency hasn't responded to the BSCC, but there is also a significant threat to physical or mental health of the people living in that facility. So you will see, again, there are some green items. Los Angeles County just received their initial inspection report. They were inspected late in the 2022 inspection cycle. They're still working through their corrective action plan process, and the rest will look very familiar. There are issues that our field representatives are regularly working through with the administrators of those facilities. And right now, we don't have any, we're not requesting any of those sheriffs to appear before the board at this time. I can jump over to the juvenile update. Just waiting for my iPad to load here. And again, these are items of non-compliance from the 2022 inspection cycle. There were several items added to this dashboard in the last few weeks for the Riverside County detention facilities and the Los Angeles County juvenile halls. These inspections took place in the final months and weeks of the 2022 biennial inspection cycle. I'm going to have this over to the all you have to do is hand the thing to IT and then it fixes. I think I might be back over there. So I'm not looking at the dashboard right now, but hopefully you're able to see those. You might, you have it right on your iPads there. In the case of the Riverside County facilities, it's been almost 70 days since the initial inspection report has been issued to the probation department. Their corrective action plan was due on January 28th and was submitted on time. The department has until April 30th to correct those issues to avoid a determination of suitability. And this is within the Welfare and Institutions Code, section 209D timeline of up to 90 days. And according to their corrective action plan, Riverside County probation anticipates correcting those issues prior to the April due date. So we will update you at these issues and how they're doing at our next regular update. The information for Los Angeles is for the new inspection cycle. I wanted to clarify that the issues of suitability that the agency worked through were for the previous inspection cycle. And those issues, thank you so much. And those issues live with the suitability determinations that were made in previous meetings. What we're looking at now for Los Angeles is a result of inspections in a new inspection cycle, the 2022 inspection cycle. The inspection for the Central Juvenile Hall and the Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall took place in throughout November and December of 2022. So the Los Angeles County Department of Probation received their initial inspection report noting items of non-compliance that you see here on January 13th of 2023. They have until March 14th to submit their corrective action plan. And that's again within the Welfare and Institutions Code section 209D. They have 60 days to submit their corrective action plan. This corrective action plan must outline how the items of non-compliance will be corrected, and the issues must be remedied within 90 days of submitting that corrective action plan, which given the timeline would be June 12th of this year to avoid a determination of suitability. You'll note that there's several items of non-compliance in each of the juvenile halls, ranging from relatively minor issues like missing local inspection reports to substantial issues such as staffing, room confinement, and safety checks. And many of these items are directly related to a lack of adequate staffing at the facilities. And some of these issues are repeat issues from the prior inspection cycle. I do want to point out again that these items are coded green, not because these items are okay. It's green because they are in the statutorily mandated timeframe to submit a corrective action plan, which is 60 days. And then they have 90 days after that to remedy the issues. And this is also one of the reasons that we include the number of days on this dashboard so that the public can see how many days it's been and they can follow along with the Welfare and Institutions Code timeframes for suitability. So while the agency is well within the timeframes outlined in the Welfare and Institutions Code to submit a corrective action plan, again within 60 days of the notice of noncompliance, which is March 14th, and remedy those issues within a reasonable period of time not to exceed 90 days, which is June 12th, We are nonetheless recommending that the board request the chief probation officer to appear before the board at its April meeting to accomplish a few things. To present and outline the agency's corrective action plan, to provide information on any progress toward corrective action that will have occurred to that point, and also provide detail on how the BSCC will determine compliance prior to the June 12th, 2023 deadline, including reference to documentation that the agency will review at reinspection. This is a request for Chief Gonzalez to personally appear before the board. This request for the chief to appear before the board in April is not part of a determination of suitability. Due to the history of non-compliance and suitability in the Los Angeles County Juvenile Halls, staff believes that it's really important for both the county and the board to clearly understand the steps that need to be taken to remedy the many items of non-compliance prior to the conclusion of the corrective action plan period, which is June 12th, only days before the board's scheduled June 15th, 2023 meeting. With that, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions.
I have no questions, but I do have a comment. And of course, we've talked about this issue of LA internally a great deal. And here we are, we find ourselves back in this process where statutorily, they certainly have the rights to the time allotted in the code. I am not comfortable waiting until we bump up to that deadline in June. And I too would like to invite the chief. Invite is not the use of the word. I'd like to acquire his presence here at our April meeting to talk about progress, to give us a progress report. If we have issues, what he deems as progress, we can have an intervention then rather than getting to the end of the cycle and getting responses that aren't adequate for us to let them move forward detaining young people in the state of California. So I support Allison's proposition. I'm troubled that we're right here so quickly and find LA in this scenario, and I would ask for board comment on anything you have regarding her entire report or LA specifically. Yes.
So this item is.
This item is agendized as an information item, correct? Are there any, I mean, I support what Allison is proposing. I'd refer to council. Do we?
So the agenda, it was agendized as an item that requesting approval.
Okay.
The staff recommendation, the board report was information only when we posted the board report, but we can still take a vote on this item because of the way it was agendized.
Thank you for the clarification.
Madam Chair, Kirkings, probation. I would agree that that we would ask Chief Gonzalez to be here in April, at least so that we can get ahead as much as we can, as much information that we can get from the department about progress made up to that point, and just so that we can have the information available to us. But we at least give the time for that to happen, and then for sure in any event, whatever status it is at that time, for Chief to be able to come and address the board.
I agree. Thank you.
Madam Chair, are there any other people in his organization or at the county level, such as the CAO's office, that you would like to also be here, because that can affect staffing, hiring, labor negotiations? I mean, it's a little bit more complex than I think just the chief. So if there's other people, maybe now would be a good time.
It is more complex than that. I would hope the chief would see that coming and invite certainly any of his command staff or executives that oversee these facilities to join with him. We would certainly welcome the CAO or any board members that want to intervene and comment at this juncture. I don't think as a body we can require the CAO to come meet with us. But I do think it's within our purview to invite the chief to do that. And I like the suggestion, Chief Mills, because as we all know, these facility operations are not simply a problem of one department within a county, but certainly you have to be funded, you have to be supported. And I would hope they see fit to bring those individuals in to talk to us. Yes.
I mean, I'd like to just double down on what Chief Mills said. So the question is, what if Chief Gonzalez is not able to run his department? Do we bring the head of the union in? I mean, we learned last time that 11% of staff are coming to work. 11%. So of course, there's 20 items of noncompliance. Who's gonna do this work to make sure they're compliant if no one's showing up? And I know the 11% that are showing up because I see them every Saturday, and they're incredible people. There's incredible staff that are showing up and having to work doubles every day and not going home to their family because their colleagues aren't showing up to work. So should the head of the union come in? I mean, the chief's been trying to get a special hiring directive from the union for a year now, and that hasn't been done. The CEO can do the special hiring directive and allow the chief to proceed without the union. They haven't done that. The Board of Supervisors has the ability to break through some of these barriers and make it happen. They haven't done it. So should the 5 supervisors come with the CEO and the head of the union and the chief? I mean, I also know every one of these 80-something kids that are in SYTF. And because there's a lack of staffing, they're sitting and playing video games from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. There's a unit there that hasn't gone to outdoor rec in 2 months because of a lack of staffing. They're supposed to get an hour every day. They haven't gone in 2 months.
And that's.
There's a young man who in 1 week beat up a teacher, stabbed someone in the face, and beat up a volunteer. And he was just put back in his unit every time because they can't open new units and find places to place someone like that. Right? And I don't want anyone to misconstrue this. There's also 60 kids that are in college and doing incredibly, but they have nothing to do because there's not enough staff. Staff can't even move them to college sometimes. So who are we allowed to require to show up here?
Well, you make excellent points. And we know that in every department in the 58 counties, there are various moving parts, just as there are at CDCR. There are moving parts all over the place. There are labor issues, there are budget issues, there are issues that they are confronted with. And in my humble opinion, we talk to the point individual. We bring in the chief probation officer of Los Angeles County and let him address these issues. Absolutely, they have individuals that don't show up to work. We're not going to fix this from the perspective of this board. We can acknowledge that's an issue. We cannot let them stay open because that is an issue. If they are not doing what they are supposed to do, if they're not protecting the young people in their care and custody, if they're not adhering with the minimum regulations, then this board's obligation is to say, you no longer can incarcerate people in LA County juvenile halls. They must fix their countywide issues. And I think this discussion will help the probation department know how they should prepare for this and who they should bring in for this. And we can acknowledge their labor issues all day long. We can acknowledge the fact they can't get their staff to come to work, and we can acknowledge that they have shortages. What we can't do is allow that to become an okay for them to continue operating. And so we're going to ask them to come in early. We're going to honor the statutory guidelines we're faced with, and they must fix their house. We will simply say their house stays open or their house closes, in my opinion. And I accept any other, I look to any of you who are in county land and tell us that, it can be done any other way.
gonna say that understanding we can't compel those other entities, would it be possible just to send them a copy of the notice and some backup information? More than likely,
Yes, and you
they're
know, we
just
do
going to
that.
disregard.
Do that. They are noticed every time.
Okay.
So it is not a lack of information. We just can't compel them into action necessarily. Yeah, Supervisor Chavez.
So I really agree with that sentiment. And what my recommendation would be to send a formal invitation. While we can't compel them, there's no reason we can't invite them. And I think it demonstrates the seriousness in which we're taking this. I think it also demonstrates that we understand the complexity of the challenges they're dealing with. But I think that absent that, we're going to keep playing kind of back and forth. And
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what you all want to stop. And I think the board wants to stop as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, I think that's certainly, there's nothing prohibiting an invitation. And I tend to agree with you. I don't know that that needs to be an action item. What we're asking now is to compel the chief probation officer to come forward.
It's a tough situation because everybody on this board, firstly, is used to managing large operations and large budgets and a lot of folks. And there's a lot of empathy with what the chief and the county is going through and the limitations that one executive has. And so we're looking for ways to help. I think that's what I'm hearing, the system being able to do it. Secondly, folks are here because they care about the youth and understand that the remedy that we have puts them in an even more vulnerable situation. The problem is that it's not really the role of the board. The role of the board is to certify or not certify. And we've already sent the staff numerous times to assist as much as possible. And we're still on a collision course. Not predicting, but we're on a collision course where if things don't change, to decertify again. And so we're probably overextending the interaction that we want to have because we want to solve the problem. But it's an oversight body. It's not really, we're not going to manage LA County. We're not going to manage those facilities. And so it's for me, it's tough to sit here and accept that because we want to help fix it. I think maybe we just have to pull back a bit and understand that, what the role is. The role is going to be to see whether they can or not and whether there are safe conditions or not. And then we'll have to decide from that point on. All that just to say that it's a tough position, and I really empathize with us trying to participate more fully, but we're not part of the governance of Los Angeles County.
I appreciate that, Director, that we are not the governing body of Los Angeles County. I think my intent is more to make sure that the folks in Los Angeles understand the gravity of the situation. And before I vote to pull the pin one way or the other, that I want to make sure that they have a complete understanding that they could potentially not have a secured facility for potentially some pretty violent people. And if that is going to be the case, I would personally like to know that the Board of Supervisors, the CAO's office, the municipal police chiefs, the sheriff of Los Angeles County completely understand the gravity of the situation. And I mean, that does affect my opinion on this. And I agree with you. We want to do everything we can within our statutory limitations to guide the process through inspections and requests after request after request. But for some reason, it does not appear that somebody in the system there does not quite understand the gravity of the situation and aren't willing to make compromises to adhere to the policies that our legislature has set forward. And so that's what my interest is. And I agree with you. We cannot oversee any jail facility or secured facility in this state.
A lot of sense. Thank you for.
I mean, I agree with both of these gentlemen. I think Chair Penner, if you could just state, I can't see who is in the audience at home. But hoping that there's some representatives from LA County Probation and the CEO's office and the Board of Supervisors, can you just state clearly what the law is in terms of consequences if in 60 days or less, they haven't corrected all 20 of these issues at both juvenile halls? What do you have to do, or what does this board have to do by law?
We will find them unsuitable.
So just to reiterate the timeline again,
It's 90 days, actually.
well, we have 60 plus 90.
Yeah.
So they received their initial inspection report in January 13th. Thank you. They have 60 days to submit a corrective action plan to us. If they fail to do that, and I assume they will submit a corrective action plan, but they have 60 days to submit the plan to us, which is March 14th. Thank you. And so from that date, they have 90 days to fix all their issues. And the problem we have, and if they don't fix their issues within those 90 days, the statute provides that at the next scheduled board meeting, the board has to make a determination of suitability. And the standard for that is if they're out of compliance with the board's regulations, the board needs to find them not suitable for the confinement of youth.
And are you saying if the board finds them unsuitable for the confinement of youth, that they have to close Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall and Central Juvenile Hall?
Yes, and the way we managed this in the last cycle was we found them not suitable, and we did, and again, a special thanks to Lisa Southwell in terms of being down there constantly. They were able to get those last items fixed after they were found unsuitable. And when they are found unsuitable, they have 60 days to basically vacate the premises. And we scheduled our board meetings around that 60-day vacator period where they were supposed to be emptying the hall. We convened our meeting, found them suitable based on the corrective actions that they took. And so, that was the last and final opportunity they had. And if they had not corrected those things, they would have had to close the facility. And what we are looking at right now is, to borrow the metaphor that was already used, the train going down the tracks, we already see June 12th is their deadline. The board on June 15th will have to make a determination of suitability. And so, the question is in the interim, does the board wish to have an April discussion with all parties, as many parties as want to come here to discuss what the plan is? And I would even potentially add also a plan. The county is required to have a juvenile hall. If one or both juvenile halls are going to close in June plus 60 days, what is your plan for youth if you cannot use Central or Barry J. Nydorf?
So on June 12th, if they have not fixed these 40 factors of unsuitability, they will have to vacate both facilities by August 12th.
So June 12th is the deadline. The board meets on June 15th. Board takes an action 60 days from then.
Got it. And Ms. Ganter, of the 57 other counties, have you ever heard of any other counties having a facility with 20 or more issues of noncompliance?
Yes, it's happened. What usually occurs is that by the time, not usually, what has happened frequently in the past is by the time they turn in their corrective action plan, which is that 60 days, the items are addressed. The items are addressed well within advance of having to go into that second 90-day period.
How many counties right now in their juvenile facilities are out of compliance?
So right now, the ones you see are Riverside and Los Angeles. Those are the two.
So you're telling me there's 56 counties in compliance and 2 counties out of compliance?
Correct.
think that what really concerns us is, and really, the public was right to demand from us action last year in that it's the ongoing issues and the continuing a cycle of noncompliance and then correcting and then going in again and then correcting. That's the part that really, I think, what concerns this body on their ability to maintain safe conditions.
Thank you. I think you state that very effectively. And so what we're trying to do is to front load this with an April conversation so that we don't find ourselves in that June moment and then have to go, an additional 90 days to be able to say that response, that fix is not satisfactory to us. We would like to be able to have that conversation well before we hit the June marker. So, and I, for the record, I think members of the public and even maybe members of this board, are troubled by these statutory timelines that we must adhere to. And, we are a body that is subject to the laws of the state of California, and we cannot move any faster on these juvenile facilities or any slower on these juvenile facilities. And we're front loading this instance really, I think, for the good of all involved, for the probation department, for any other entities in the county of LA, and for this board's working knowledge. But we cannot ignore, nor can we take a left turn and close them tomorrow because we don't like what we're seeing. We have to adhere to these. So I don't want that to be construed by anybody as insensitivity, lack of caring, lack of, not wanting to do the right thing. I just put that on the record because we often hear from the public that, we're not taking action in a timely fashion. So, Norma, go ahead.
I just want to say this, it's really hard to hear that this happens and that it's in Los Angeles County. And although I understand about the consequence part that things should happen as they do with LA County, if that is closures of Barry J and Central, sure. But I think as the oversight board, I think that we should invite the Board of Supervisors or make some, to show this is the, Allison or Ms. Ganter just said that this was, very rare. And so this is a rare occurrence. So we should do something rare also. And let's invite the Board of Supervisors so that we can know that we're doing as much as we can for the youth of LA County. And I, like Scott, also go inside Central. I was just there earlier this week, and there's, just exactly what Scott said. There's a lack of staff. There's not a place for the youth to go. They haven't been outside. There's, yeah. So I would really appreciate if we could invite the Board of Supervisors. I don't know how everyone feels about that, but I would feel really great about that.
Well, it harms no one to invite. And I think
Great.
that's an excellent suggestion. We're being a little more directive with the chief probation officer and any of his executive staff that need to be here that day.
To clarify on Chief Mills' proposal, do we need to identify the folks that you're going to invite, or we're leaving that to staff to determine?
I think that we're going to have to give Chief Gonzalez due respect and hope that he's hearing this and knows that we want the in the know people in the room. And I think we made that very clear. But I think we have to defer to him for those decisions.
Would you I apologize, would you entertain somebody go on record here and saying that we will invite the Board of Supervisors since they are the?
I think we've all agreed that an invitation does no harm and can only help everybody to do the right thing in this scenario.
I agree with that approach. And I think to give Chief Gonzalez that due deference to be able to work with, his administration in Los Angeles County and whoever else. But I think certainly this board showing forth that the urgency by inviting, all those folks that we've already talked about But I'd be interested as a board member just to know, I think everyone can see the concern from this board. I really want to know what the concern and the level of concern that Los Angeles County does have. It's important for me to
Yes.
be able to hear from whether it be board members or the CAO's office about really what is this a priority for them to keep these two institutions open? And then if they are going to stay open, what kind of resources, what kind of help are they going to be able to provide to the probation department to not just keep it open just so that we can go through this cycle again, but what can we do to resolve these ongoing issues? And who has the will locally to really have a long lasting impact so that the children, so that the youth can be in a safe place where they can be rehabilitated and opportunity for them to be able to go back at home, because at some point they will leave. And so I'm really, that's what I would like to be able to hear directly from the folks in Los Angeles County, to be able to hear that, because as we've talked about, this is a rare occurrence. This doesn't happen in other counties. And so why is it continually happening in Los Angeles is a question.
And we certainly, and reiterate, we have great respect for Chief Gonzalez and his ability. And I'll have to leave my comments here because I gave you this long speech about we're not governing LA County, and then I jumped right in with all sorts of.
You did do that. You did do that.
I'm aware of it, but perhaps it is particularly appropriate to invite the Board of Supervisors, because the last time Chief Gonzalez was before us, he outlined how some of the decisions were outside of his control, and he was awaiting decisions by the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I think a huge piece of this from the Board of Supervisors is that they just don't really see, they're not hearing the speech. They don't understand the gravity of the consequences. And when you talk about level of concern, it's because they don't understand the gravity of the consequences. And obviously there's a gravity of the consequences to supervisors and to counties, but let's not forget the human consequences of this, right? Again, I'm around that 11% of staff that's showing up to work every day and doing a phenomenal job caring about kids and working with kids. And we have hundreds of kids in there, most of whom are doing the right thing, changing their lives, moving in the right direction without the support, right? I was just in a unit 2 days ago where they have 20 kids on each side, and there's virtually no program, but there's also virtually no violence, right? So somehow they're not getting to the level of frustration and taking out on each other, which I would. I would be so frustrated, and I am right now. So I just don't want to forget the human consequences of this. If we do our job and have to say you must vacate these facilities, hundreds of jobs lost, hundreds of kids potentially shipped out to counties all over the state that have room, and parents having to drive 6 hours to visit their kid in juvenile hall in another county. The consequences are severe, the human toll of this, right? But we're bound by the law. We're bound by making sure facilities are humane and hopefully much better than that. Yeah, it's an awful position to be put in.
It is a difficult position, but I actually think everybody's comments today illustrate the depth of care and concern and the will to get LA County up to a standard that we can all abide by, but we're not there yet. And our concern, our request is based on a track history that is not tolerable. And so we have to make this move at this juncture, and at the same time, while adhering to all of our mandates. With that said, asking for any further board comments. I'm going to go to a public comment at this point.
Yes, Madam Chair, we currently have 4 members of the public And I'm gonna call on the first one. That will be Aditi.
Aditi, after you're done, just before you begin, I'm going to ask Adam, then closes the queue and go forward, Aditi.
Thank you. Aditi Sharakar with Children's Defense Fund, California. I want to start off by saying I completely understand the statutory regime we're under here. I know what the BSCC can and can't do in this situation. I want to highlight how absurd it is that after all the oversight over the last year with the unsuitability process, with Lisa Southwell's tireless efforts trying to get LA into compliance, with the AG's office also serving as an oversight body, Los Angeles County continues to put their youth at severe risk. None of these violations are new. Safety checks not being performed, the video review does not corroborate the written documentation, room confinement, use of force, none of this is new. How can anybody have faith in this process when it keeps happening over and over again? How can anybody believe that young people are safe in LA County halls right now or ever? It makes no sense. And I know the statutory regime here. What I'm saying is LA County comes into compliance under the letter of the law, and then we know for a fact that within a few weeks, days, months, they will be right back to being out of compliance with the same regulations. It is clear that no amount of help or effort or oversight is going to make them change because they can never maintain their compliance. It makes absolutely no difference if you ask the Board of Supervisors to come, you ask the chief to come, they're going to tell you, yeah, we'll fix it. And then on paper, maybe they will. And in one more month, I bet they will be out of compliance again. How many times are you going to allow this cycle to go on and on? I'm urging you to please limit the amount of chances you give them to the very minimum that you are allowed under the law. I get it. I get the regime. What I'm telling you is that LA County cannot be trusted to maintain compliance, even if they come into compliance in the next 60 days. They cannot be trusted with young people. Young people's lives are at risk. Safety checks are not happening. Use of force policies are being violated. These are not minor violations, as Ms. Ganter has already pointed out. It is unacceptable that LA allows their young people to be housed in these conditions. And I hope that the board does not give them a single inch of wiggle room here, because they do not deserve it. And they have shown time and time again that they don't take this seriously. They do not take the minimum regulations seriously. They don't take the unsuitability process seriously. They have no interest in maintaining a safe
Since you're
environment.
winding up, but I need you to do it a little quicker, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The queue was closed and there's 3 left, and the next one would be Charlie.
Charlie, you're there?
And we'll move on to Brian Goldstein.
Brian?
Good afternoon, Brian Goldstein with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. We're alarmed that BSCC fails to address the danger in California's jails and juvenile facilities. As a reminder to the public, this agency adopted enhanced inspections because of a 2019 Sacramento Bee investigation. That investigation reported how a BSCC inspector of Kern County's jail saw people in solitary confinement for long periods of time, sleeping on the floor, using yoga mats. Your inspector briefly wrote down this violation, and then nothing happened. Kern's sheriff then bought more yoga mats. Given the public outcry, the BSCC said inspections would improve, but we still have serious concerns. These are your inspector's quotes on LA's juvenile halls. Safety checks are not being documented. Youth are placed in their rooms beyond what is allowable. Youth do not consistently get an hour outdoors each day. Exercise is not consistently offered. Youth do not have a means to call for assistance other than knocking, and this can't always be heard. What more does BSCC need to hear before you take more immediate action. It's not enough just to hear LA County's excuses. Listen to youth who know what's really happening. Thank you.
Next, we have Nancy Juarez.
Nancy Juarez, Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. In 2022, BSCC inspection staff found that between May 18th to June 1st, probation staff claimed to have conducted safety checks on paperwork. But video showed these checks never happened. Probation officers lied about whether youth were in or out of a room in the safety check log. To reiterate, LA Probation was caught lying on paperwork about whether they conducted safety checks for youth under their supervision. In March 2022, knowing that they would be found out of compliance, LA Probation moved all youth from Central Hall to Barry J to avoid an inspection by BSCC staff. How do we know this won't happen again in June? Here we are today, and BSCC inspectors have once again found these systemic failures by LA Probation. Plus, they've documented major problems in Riverside County. The board should be outraged by the underlying noncompliance. And these are not minor issues. In the first half of 2022, probation reports on use of force did not match video. One officer claimed a young person approached him with fist clenched to justify use of force, but the video directly contradicted this. When the Attorney General sued LA County and probation, they learned that training encouraged staff to leave out key details when creating paperwork. The BSCC needs to live up to its mission and protect young people from what is clearly an unsafe and unstable environment. If people aren't showing up for work with a hefty salary, what does that say about this environment we expect young people to be in? Y'all are now entering a new juvenile Title 15 and 24 regulation process. Over 50 young people were planning to attend the January 10th ESC meeting to make their voices heard. Please do right by them. They have poured their hearts out to y'all. They have sacrificed their time and energy to tell you their story. Please do not create standards just to do nothing when they are broken. Thank you.
And I'm going to call Charlie Brown one more time.
Be great. Thanks.
Charlie, are you there?
Okay, Adam, is that complete
That's it for
comments?
public.
Okay, thank you. Back to the board. Any comments, questions? I think we have to construct a motion here. I'm happy to give it a shot, unless Aaron's already got it written down for me. I think it would begin by asking Chief Gonzalez from LA County Probation to appear at our April meeting and bring substantive staff with him in order to address their current issues of noncompliance. I think we would also extend invitations to county execs and Board of Supervisors members and other interested pivotal parties to this interaction, and I would leave it at that. I think that covers this portion of it.
I'm sorry, my name is Paloma.
Okay. That covers it. Okay, so that, yes. Did I just move the motion?
I think you stated the motion.
Stated the motion, yes.
Then I'll second.
Thank you.
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber. Aye. Mr. Villarosa.
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes. Aye. Ms. Vernon,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Abstain.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Budnick,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you, Adam. We're now at that portion in the meeting just prior to adjournment where we would invite public comments on any item. We've referred to it a number of times in this meeting, and I'd ask Adam to tell me who's in the queue.
I'm going to do one check. And we have
Unmute.
quite a few. We have 11 members of the public who wishes to speak.
Okay, thank you to those 11 for waiting for this point. I would ask you, Adam, now to close the queue.
Okay.
And
And I'll
uh,
call on the first, and that would be Paloma Cerna.
Hi, yes, thank you, board meeting, members of the board to, let me speak during this time. Regarding the LA counties, not being compliant with what you guys are requesting is very sad to hear about the children. I no longer live in LA County, but I used to, and I knew people where their children were being abused in the system. The adults that were supposed to be watching these children were using them as they were having the children fight each other for their own entertainment. I know sexual abuse, and it's a shame. And this was back in 2010 when I left LA County. And this is very shocking to hear that these things are still going on. And it's awful to hear this. You know, I live in the state of Montana, and I'm here attending this meeting regarding the death of my daughter, Lisa Sterna from San Diego County, about the lack of medical care and lack of compassion from the deputies and the medical staff there. They watched her die tortuously for 5 days, denied her any type of medication. But then to hear about LA County, it's a shame what is happening with the state of California. Something has to be done here. As you guys can see, these counties, San Diego and LA, they have serious problems. They need to be held accountable. There's no way that this will stop until deputies, medical staff, the probation, they all are held accountable.
and thank you. Time limits up. I appreciate your remarks. Next, Adam.
Madam Chair, before I continue with the Zoom participants, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in the room who would like to give a public comment.
I would assume, are there cards? Okay. We do so much Zoom, we forgot about you in person. I apologize.
Thank you. My name is Janice Franklin, and I am here along with Tania Carter, Executive Director of Bonafide Sisterhood. We are the community-based organization that was a sub-grantee with the City of Antioch, part of CalVIP Cohort 4. A proposal was approved in February of 2022, and the terms of that work was supposed to begin July of 2022. Since then, after our attempts for clarification, as well as in order to stay in schedule with the proposal that was approved by this committee, our attempts for that clarification were ignored. When we reached out to BSCC, we reached out to the CalVIP administrator, Katrina Jackson, who basically said that until there was a contract between us and the City of Antioch, that they were the ones that we had to go to for information, that there was nothing BSCC could do. Basically, the reason why we reached out is because in November of 2022, the City of Antioch notified us that they were dropping us as the sub-grantee on this grant, even though they have no other organization or the resources to perform the work that was awarded and approved by this organization. To our knowledge, they have not come before this board to request any type of modification on the terms of that proposal as well. And so our question to the board today is, what ethical practices are there for the grantees of the CalVIP grants, as well as any other grants, to make sure that they are handling them appropriately, especially when they are a first-time grantee? And we also did request that they get mentorship from other veteran grantees, since this was their first time receiving this award, and that was denied or ignored. So we just want to ask, what accountability has BSCC have for those grantees?
Okay, thank you.
I'm also Tanya Carter. I'm the founder of Bonafide Sisterhood. I started doing violence prevention work in Antioch in 2003, working with moms who were having problem moving to the inner city with Section 8, advocating for them, making sure our inner city youth that were coming to Antioch without the proper resources were getting their 504 plans and IEP met. I started a hair salon in 2007 to help moms get through the welfare to work program through apprenticeships with hair salons. So I've been doing this work in Antioch before funding even became available for violence prevention work. I'm the East Oakland Senior Violence Interrupter. I do the work in Oakland. I also work with homicide families. Antioch call me anytime it's a homicide or any type of situation with violence in a city for my expertise on it. If I'm working with the families, what day is the funeral and these type of things. So I just feel that this is unfair because the community know me based on relationships that I have with them. And I work 3 jobs to provide these services. I get no funding from nowhere. So for us to go with them on a grant thinking they had the best interest of the community, it did to do us like that. It just got me in a place where I wanted to give up, but I didn't. We had to get another facility to continue this work. And the bigger any I get, the more violence is coming there because we have no prevention measures. And I only could do so much with what I have. And I just think this process of us never receiving grants and not being, educated on the language or what was really needed, that we were taking advantage of. And we still have to service these people. So I just want y'all to consider reinstating us. We don't know how that works or what's next, but we still have to service our community and not re-traumatize them based on funding.
Well, thank you. I mean, I can obviously tell your remarks are heartfelt, and I think it is really a more staff-centric conversation that I'd like you to have, and we have staff right here. So I appreciate your remarks. I think we can answer your questions. I don't know that we're going to give you the answer you want, but you'll at least leave here understanding more about the process.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here? Okay. All right. Back to the
I'm back to,
virtual.
yes. We have Brian Goldstein.
Brian?
Good afternoon, Brian Goldstein, CJCJ. We're alarmed by the surge of deaths within Riverside County's jails. There's clearly a problem with staff bringing drugs inside. 2022 saw hundreds of overdoses, and this will continue if nothing changes. We ask BSCC to conduct a thorough inspection of Riverside County. Please take the necessary steps. Listen to the families, hold staff accountable, and protect people in Riverside County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ashley Rojas.
Hi, folks. Hello, folks. Thank you. I'm calling on behalf of Indigenous Justice. And we have 2 questions. The Budget Act of 2022, Senate Bill 154, established the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Grant Program. We're asking if there are any updates on this program, and if steering committee member applications are still being taken. And then the second question, in the beginning of this meeting, there was mentioned a $11.4 million grant program for federally recognized tribes. And the question there is there a policy connected to this funding or another source available for review? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Katie can answer you right now.
Yes, very quickly. Thank you so much for the question. The grant that I spoke about at the beginning of the meeting was the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant, the very same. We have populated that executive steering committee and are about to schedule the first meeting in March. You can contact Eddie Escobar for more information about the grant. I hope that helps.
All right, next, Adam.
Next, we have Cheryl Canson. We'll move on to Daisy Ramirez. We'll move on to Kathy, just the first name. It'd be Katie or Kathy. And we'll move on to Nate Williams.
We sure we got our technical ducks in order here? All right, just checking.
Nate Williams. Okay, Denise Settles.
Hi. Yeah, I am here representing, well, not representing, but as a member of North County Equity and Justice Coalition. My brother-in-law was died in jail in San Diego County this last July. And, you know, the number of deaths is concerning overall. I think my and my family's primary concern really is the overlap, which is significant, has always been significant between mental health and jails. And unfortunately, because of overcrowding in the mental health facilities, the Venn diagram has gotten even more overlapped. And I think, you know, the stressors on both systems is untenable, both from the overcrowding in prisons and overcrowding in the mental health facilities. My brother-in-law was a ward of the state. He had been institutionalized for the last several years and had a history of institutionalization at the state level in LA many years prior to that. And there is absolutely no justification for him having been held in a jail and for as long as he did, which led to with isolation and being put in solitary for long periods of time. He was heavily schizophrenic and had an affective disorder. There's absolutely no reason for him to have been in jail. It's completely unjustifiable. He should have been put back into the county facility where he was being held or at the state facility, but there wasn't room in either place. And we are certain that that led to his death, and the lack of transparency and the lack of oversight and the lack of communication between the person who, you know, at the state level or at the county level who was in
Denise,
charge
I'm
of
sorry
his
to interrupt,
case.
but Denise, we're gonna have
Yes.
to wind down here. I apologize for the
Okay.
interruption.
Okay, yes. So I guess my main issue is that, you know, these are issues that need to be dealt with. I think it affects both systems. And, you know, holistically, mental health needs to be addressed better, and it certainly needs to be addressed within the purview of the jail system. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna call on Charlie Brown because he raised his hand again.
I'm calling to abbreviate it. Let's get back to the why we're on this. From North County Equity and Justice, Yusuf Miller. We want 2 more people on
Sorry,
the,
hold on a minute.
can you hear me?
Charlie, are you?
That was Charlie Brown.
Charlie, go ahead, please.
Charlie, feel free to unmute and give your public comment.
Yeah, that would help us if you announce who you are when you begin to speak. We thought it was just a voice coming from somewhere else. Apologies. Charlie, are you out there?
We're working on getting Charlie unmuted again.
Okay, whatever you want to call me, I try to be private. But when my son died, I can no longer be private. But I care about Sons of the Future. We need health professionals on your board. I mean, at least 2 more. And I will go past you if you want me to. But that was the focus today for our group. Because everything leads back to mental health. And I won't waste your time because words prior to this already said those things. I just want to focus back on the focus. And again, I'm with North County Equity and Justice Yusuf Miller, and San Diego County will work on her problems. But you are the state, so we need you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Sonia. Sonia, are you there? All right, we'll move on to Saxon's older sister.
Hello, my name is Sabrina Weddle. I am with North County Equity and Justice Coalition. I am the older sister of Saxon Rodriguez. Saxon Rodriguez died in San Diego County Jail on July 20th, 2021, 4 days into him being in San Diego County Jail. That same year, 18 people died and 6 of those deaths were drug-related overdoses. Saxon's death was declared an accident overdose, but I don't believe it was an accident because of the massive amounts of drugs being brought into the San Diego County jails. This year, 2 San Diego sheriff's deputies, Corey Ritchie and Alan Wareski, have been caught and arrested for drug possession. For this reason, I have asked to meet with Kelly Martinez, the new San Diego County Sheriff, to discuss the Del Jess and drug problem in San Diego jails. Kelly Martinez has refused to meet with me and the other in custody death families. We support the CLERB recommendations to scan and search all jail and staff sworn deputies who enter the jails. This is one of the only ways to ensure no drugs enter the jails. To this day, I do not know how the drugs that killed my brother got into the jail, and no official can confirm or deny that they have been brought in by a deputy. The CLERB conducted an independent investigation into my brother's death, and they have determined that the San Diego sheriffs were responsible for his death due to the lack of care for their position. They checked him at the 65-minute mark and not the 60-minute mark. Had they checked him on time, he'd still be alive. This year, in 2022, there were 93 drug overdoses in the Central Jail alone. That is where my brother died. A total of 845 Narcan doses were deployed by the jail staff and deputies in Central Jail. I am asking the board to please investigate San Diego jails and in the individuals who run the jails and work in the jails. I'm asking you to do this in the name of my little brother, Saxon Rodriguez, who was 22 for 19 days. Again, he was in custody for 4 days and died the day before his court hearing.
As you can hear, your time is run. Thank you for your remarks.
Next, we have Paloma Serna.
Hi, yes, my name is Paloma Serna. My daughter, Lisa Serna, died in the Las Colinas jail in San Diego County. She died in November 11th, 2019, out of, I believe, maybe 10 or 15 years of inmate's death. Her case is going to be the first case that's going to be charging 2 nurses, a nurse and a doctor criminally for her death. But still, we do have video evidence that will be shown in court on March 27th in the San Diego court. They're going to be able to show this to the public that it was just not those 2 people. We need the deputies to be held accountable for her death. She lay there for a whole hour in which they walked by her jail cell knowing she was dying. She was 8 weeks pregnant, and she was being monitored for 24/7 for 5 days. And they watched her have seizures for withdrawals in which they never provided her any type of medication for her withdrawals. So she started having seizures, and she had 12 of them, and not one deputy or medical staff have ever entered her cell to render aid. And despite that, as she was having a seizure, the last time that she took her last breath, a deputy and a nurse left her on the ground, walked away, locked the door, and did not return for a whole hour. Justice needs to be served for the impacted family of San Diego, and obviously for the state of California. I thank you, and I hope that you guys are able to do something to intervene and force the sheriff department of San Diego to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Luis Nolasco.
Good afternoon, board. I am going to read a comment for Lisa Matus, who was here earlier, but unfortunately had to hop off. So I'll just be reading on her behalf. This is from Lisa. Good afternoon, members of the board. This is Lisa Matus again, mother of Richard Matus, who died in Riverside County custody last year. Riverside Sheriff's Department doesn't follow policy and procedures when someone dies in custody. I'm not even sure they have a policy for this. No one who works at the jail knows what to do or say when we ask for more information. We called several times over and over every day. Jail staff would not confirm or deny that Richard was dead. They said they don't give medical information over the phone and could not disclose anything. He was still showing up online as if he was in the housing unit. No one would speak to us. We have no idea whether there has been any investigation into his death. Again, we called to try to get answers and didn't even get a call back. If my other son was not in custody at the same facility, we would not have even known that Richard died. I spoke with my son 2 hours before he was found unresponsive. He was fine. I've read his autopsy report and find it very upsetting that the sheriff's department can outright lie to the public. Sheriff Bianco went on TV and told the press that there was no foul play and that Richard died of a fentanyl overdose. My son has no history of drug abuse and is working hard to prove his innocence for over 4 years. He was 29 years old with 2 children, yet he had blunt force trauma to the head, abdomen, and extremities, also blockage in his heart. He had allergy meds in him. We get calls from other inmates in housing unit telling us to investigate this because something is right. I'm assuming we'll never know because in custody pretrial detainees are not cared about. They are guilty. They are guilty until proven innocent and deserve the death penalty according to Riverside County Sheriff. It's hard to list all the things that need to be fixed. The emergency buttons don't work in a lot of cells. The deputies don't come when buttons are pressed. Deputies should not be allowed to assault the inmates. When they do, inmates get extra charges. These people who write the reports are lying. I hope you do several unannounced visits and speak to inmates to actually see what goes on. An outside agency should be immediately called upon when someone dies. There should be a civilian in the jail every day to oversee.
Excuse me. You've gone past the 2 minutes, and I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay, next we Katie. Katie, or is it Kathy?
Yes, it's Kathy. Sorry, I don't know if that was spelled right. Okay, so good afternoon, board members. My name is Kathy Nigro, and my son, Michael Vasquez, passed away in Riverside County in the Coysburg Detention Center last year on May 26th. My concern is about the Coysburg detention specifically because they are known to have the worst and most deaths. I have heard that they don't do safety checks and on the hour, which needs to be, I heard that they, through the coroner deputy told me their protocol is to do safety checks on every hour. This has not been, the fact. We need to know what the protocol and staff training is for treating an overdose or someone that appears to be overdosing. Who is given the Narcan? Are they given it immediately? And how long between overdoses and till paramedics arrive? My son was only in custody for 6 days and died 2 days after his arraignment. He appeared to look fine in court. He didn't have any money or access to any money. So he got access to fentanyl inside within 6 days. How are these drugs being given so easily and offered so many times at this detention center? Also, why aren't staff doing a very diligent and thorough job on ensuring the drugs are not entering in their facility right after someone dies or is even caught with drugs inside? My son died 10 days after another inmate, Justin Kale. Justin and Michael were in the same housing pod area, which is known to be a very active running pod with many drugs going around. If staff had ensured that the drugs that killed Justin weren't in the unit anymore, my son wouldn't have died 10 days later. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
There's 3 more left, and the first one will be Israel.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My name is Israel Villa, he, him, his, with the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice. First, I want to thank all the community members who showed up today. This is very triggering. My hearts and prayers and thoughts are with you. My public comment here, I feel like a broken record, but I'm going to do it anyways. My question is, where is accountability going to come from system stakeholders who are failing in many levels, right? We know what is happening in Los Angeles, where your own legal counsel, Mr. McGuire, acknowledged that probation department in LA moved kids in the evening to avoid an inspection that was coming from y'all. And we have numerous facilities with these green dots and yellow dots, but at the end of the day, there's absolutely no accountability. That system and that matrix in itself lacks accountability. And I want to challenge y'all to please help and answer all these calls. I've been coming here for 9 years to these BSCC meetings, and thus far, it's just like, yeah, there is really no accountability. There's no transition. There is no nothing. And I feel strongly because of the makeup of this board, which is primarily law enforcement stakeholders, public safety stakeholders. Hence, we're stagnated. We're getting nowhere. I am in support of 2 additional seats being added, mental health and a physician. However, that's not going to change the dynamics and the dominance here. So until we address that, we're getting nowhere. So I do ask for your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Gilbert Gills.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
I wish it was Gilbert Gill. This is his daughter. My dad, Gilbert Gill, died on Valentine's Day last year in the Vista County Jail. He had dementia and diabetes, and they arrested him for under the influence and booked him into jail, where he died 15 hours later, naked in his own feces. They told the public he died of COVID. I had a second autopsy done, and there was 71 bruises from his groin to his neck, blunt force trauma. They said he died of asphyxiation, and San Diego County saying he died of a heart attack. There's no accountability. There's no transparency. They won't give us any video, and they are killing our family members. They're torturing them. My dad had dementia, and they were well aware of that. They didn't care. The mental health, there is no mental health help there, period. If you guys could go in and change something, fix something unnoticed, it just needs to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Jennifer Schmidt.
I'm sorry, I'm also in the queue. This is Avalon Edwards. I raised my hand at the time that it was open.
That was Jennifer Schmidt is me, Gilbert Gill's daughter. I apologize.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead, Avalon.
All right, Avalon.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Avalon Edwards again. I'd like to name that this board misses significant opportunity to hear community input by placing general public comment at the end of the meeting at an unpredictable time, because many people simply can't sit on a call all day waiting to voice their 2-minute comment. I will also say, just in case board members don't know this, we have about 30 seconds to raise our hands on Zoom to be added to the queue, and that public comment queue should be open for at least 15 minutes after the period starts to allow community members to join the call. You know, I'm texting with folks telling them to hop on the call because they had to get back to their jobs, but they want their voices to be heard by this board. So I think there's some serious systemic changes that need to be made if you guys actually care about hearing what people have to say. I'm just continuing this conversation about Riverside County. It shouldn't be a given that departments are demonstrating this lack of concern for the well-being of those in their custody will continue to receive funding from this agency. This is a major power that you all hold, is to withhold funding from agencies that are actively harming and killing people like you've been hearing about all day. And yet somehow it's a given that of course they'll continue to get funding because they're a department and because departments get funding from this agency. If the BSCC sets minimum standards that are still allowing for 18 deaths last year, already 2 deaths this year, and those counties are considered to be in compliance with the minimum standards set by this board, what are the standards accomplishing? And that's a genuine question that I'd love to hear from you all. What are your minimum standards for jail conditions accomplishing if one county can kill 20 people in 13 months and fail to provide any information to the families impacted, fail to report those deaths to the DOJ within the 10-day mandated reporting period, continue to lie to the public about the cause of death for all of these people? These are our community members. Luis and I have been working with Kathy and Lisa and many other family members who have been impacted by this for months, and they have received no information or clarity about what happened to their loved ones. It's evil, and this board has done nothing, has not even recognized that this has been happening. If the board refuses to take its job seriously, then you should all step down. And I'm serious about that because this is an oversight agency. And if you're not going to provide oversight, then somebody else needs to take on that job. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for public comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I actually had emailed as well, but I guess the queue closed too soon. Is it possible for me to make a brief public comment as a former executive steering committee member of the CalVIP funding?
Sure.
Great, thank you so much. I'll make it brief. Thank you for your time. My name is Tina Criel. I was a member of the ESC committee, as I said, for the CalVIP funding last year. And I want to speak of my concern, frankly, and disappointment in what I heard and in the letter that I received on behalf of Bonafide, Sisterhood Inc. And I believe they were also there. I heard Tanya speaking. And on them being cut out of that funding, I feel like there's no accountability as a member. And of the at least 100 hours that I spent reading those proposals, we were instructed to rate people better if they had those letters of commitment from community agencies. And so I'm asking for them for you all to freeze the funding for City of Antioch going forward, to do an investigation on how they were able to pull out with their partner, and also an investigation on if this is a trend for other cities that were given this funding, because otherwise what was our work done for? And then just one other brief thing. There was also an option for microfunding that, to my memory, was not all used. And if that is an option for Bonafide Sisterhood to somehow get a part of that funding, I would like for that to be considered as well. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
That's it for public
All
comment.
right. I think, yes.
Well, it's tough up here and it's heartbreaking hearing moms come on and talking about losing a child. I can't even imagine. And I can't even imagine how much that pain's compounded when you just can't get answers from the people who your child was in the care of. And then when those people aren't giving the information as required by law to the DOJ, it's just heartbreaking testimony to hear. And my question is, like, are we doing, as we hear repeatedly about the Riverside County Jail and about the San Diego County Jail, are we doing unannounced inspections? Have we? Are we doing them often? Because if folks are doing such security checks and medical checks and mental health checks and administering Narcan properly, they have nothing to worry about. But if they're not, and people are dying because of their failures or incompetence, then that's a problem. So what are we doing as a board to make sure people are put in a position to save some lives? Because it's just really tough here to hear these moms.
Yeah, absolutely agree. But I can tell you, I actually just had this conversation with Allison and Aaron and Katie about our unannounced visits and where we stood at this point. And I noticed Allison is gone, but I think it was somewhere around already this year. Yeah. Yeah. And I wish I could tell you where they were. I don't know that specifically.
But we don't know if we've done unannounced visits to Riverside or San Diego.
That, I don't know the specifics of
We
where
can
we've
provide
done it,
that
but
for
we
you,
can.
Scott.
We should probably start doing that, right? Start doing those visits.
Continue doing.
We
those
are
visits.
doing.
No, start doing, if we haven't done them in Riverside and San Diego, we should probably start doing it because this is what we're hearing.
Yeah, that's a fair statement.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I'm super comfortable if we haven't already done it. I just don't
Yeah.
know the answer where specifically they had been. I did ask how many we had done. Yes. I don't mean to cut you off, Scott.
Yeah, I too want to certainly extend our hearts and our empathy out to the families who have lost loved ones in custody, whether it's San Diego, Riverside, LA, wherever. And I think we as a board have demonstrated clearly that we're very concerned about these issues, including in the Los Angeles Juvenile Detention Facility. And I know that staff has done an amazing job. Thank you, Katie, to you and your staff. Very meticulous in how you go about documenting and the problems that take place in many of these, in some of the jails. I take this seriously. And I know my other colleagues here who we sit on the dais with, take it seriously. I never wanted to be a sheriff because, or working for the CDCR because of how complex and difficult it is to run a detention facility. Riverside County Jail has almost 4,000 people in custody right now in a pretty confined space. The state has, sent many of people who would traditionally be in the custody of CDCR to the local facilities, crowding the jails. And it's interesting as we listen to the conversation from the people who are calling in, we have some, alleging that officers are bringing stuff into the jails. And I know that has happened, in the state, and departments have aggressively worked with the Bureau, FBI, to prosecute them and to arrest them as they should, and they should go to prison for doing that. We also hear from other members how rampant the drugs are in the jail in certain cell blocks. And I talked to, a sheriff earlier today about how difficult it is, given the current laws of strip search and so forth, to make sure that fentanyl is not getting in the jails. We heard how many times deputies have saved people's lives by administering fentanyl. 30% of people in one jail are currently on psychotropic medications. I can't imagine working in that environment, whether it's the probation departments, the state, or the sheriffs who are running these jails. You also have a confined space of 4,000 people, many of whom are violent. And this is difficult to manage. And I think we do and continue to need to hold the sheriffs at the highest level of accountability. But what I would ask all of us to do is to really consider the complexity of this and to make sure that we are holding people accountable, but at the same time, understanding that a lot of the people going into the jails are sick, dope sick, and mentally and not mentally well. And the person commented that, please have the state or, different kinds of facilities for people who are mentally ill. I couldn't agree more. They don't belong in the jail. I don't think there's a sheriff in the state that wants them to be confined to the jail space. But that's where we are, and we are not supposed to advocate from the dais here for legislation, but at the same time, just as a citizen of the state of California, I hope that we can drive for better solutions while the sheriffs and the deputies and the staff do their darn best job they can, while we as a board and as a staff continue to do surprise inspections, do the things we can to hold people accountable as best within the statutes that we're given. So of the 4,000 inmates in Riverside, and I'm familiar with Riverside because that's where I am, as a police chief, only 9 are misdemeanors. The rest are felons. And of the 9, they're all domestic violence abusers. So let's take this with the appropriate measure of respect for the people incarcerated, but also recognize, as Scott pointed out very, earlier, the 11% in Los Angeles who are working their rear ends off and doing a very difficult job under very trying circumstances. I think we should also recognize that while we do this. And, Brian Goldstein said that, staff is bringing drugs inside. If they have any information on that whatsoever, I know that, both CDCR, parole, and the sheriffs would take that in a heartbeat and run with it and do everything they could to prosecute that to the fullest extent of the law. And if they're turned away, then that becomes a different issue that we would love to hear about as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, Sheriff.
I'm not going to repeat a whole lot of things that Andy said because he's actually 100% right on point. Some of the things I want to speak to, just to inform the families about this non-information coming back to them when they ask, many of these cases immediately follow a civil lawsuit, and the counties have their hands tied from being able to release that information. It completely goes over to the attorneys, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, and that it's just a process we have to go through. Also, going to Andy's point, jails also have intelligence systems in them. The CDCR has intelligence systems in them. We need to realize that gang members are coordinating a number of things that the law now allows for. Flash incarcerations for probation. If you're a probationer and you know you're going to be violated, they secrete fentanyl on their body and they come in, and just like Andy said, we can't do the types of searches we used to be able to do with these folks. And then I've seen it in my jail. All of a sudden I'll have 7 fentanyl overdoses immediately once that person's introduced. CDCR, there are 6,900 parolees at large right now. They know that they're going to be arrested at some point. They could secrete that. They come into county jails and we have the same thing. And there's Mexican mafia members and other people that are controlling this from the streets. This is a very difficult situation to deal with. We're prepared to deal with it, and we deal with it on a case by case. But ever since prison realignment, we have significant struggles with the prisoners that we have in our custody, and significant struggles with holes that this prison realignment has caused for sheriffs across this state. Also, mental health, and I think Denise was the caller that mentioned this earlier. Sheriffs, we're with you. I wanted to get my pom-poms out for Denise. We do not want to be the mental health facilities. Unfortunately, we are. And to all the families that are, it's terrible that they're affected by this. I, like Scott, can't even stand to hear the moms that have lost their family members and the lack of really knowledge and understanding. I totally get where they're at, but we have to understand that a lot of these family members, I'd like to speak to them. I'm quite sure that there are a number of public agencies that their loved ones contacted in terms of behavioral health, public health, and a number of things. And the systems at these early entry points are failing. And instead, they end up coming to juvenile hall. They end up coming to county jails in really critically terrible medical condition. And we can't be expected to be that level of medical advice. When these folks introduce into the system at the public health level or the Department of Behavioral Health level, we can't stand behind and hide behind HIPAA and all these other things. We have got to go out and find out mechanically why these systems aren't working, and stop blaming it on the last stop for people who are truly, truly medically and or mentally ill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the board? Thank you to all. Thank you to the board members. Super insightful comments on every agenda item we had today. And thank you to members of the public. Understanding it's hard to wait till the end of the meeting. It's the process, and that's what we have. I appreciate all of your time and efforts also. So we adjourn now. Our next meeting is April 13th. See you all then.